Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. My name is Marcus. I'm 34, and I saw a second tent beside ours at the Payette National Forest in Idaho. We didn't bring it. The trip was supposed to be a reset. My marriage to Claire had been fraying at the edges for months, small arguments metastasizing into days of cold silence. Our therapist suggested we needed to reconnect away from the grind of our daily routine, to remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. Claire had found the campground online, a remote spot near the South Fork of the Payette River, accessible only by a narrow fire road that wound through dense stands of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir. The reviews praised its isolation, the crystalline quality of the night sky, the way the river's constant murmur could lull you into the deepest sleep of your life. We'd rented a small travel trailer, nothing fancy, just enough room for a bed and a compact kitchenette. Claire had been excited during the drive up from Boise, her hand resting on my thigh as she pointed out the changing landscape through the windshield. For a few hours, it felt like we were 25 again, before the miscarriage, before my promotion had consumed my life, before we'd learned how to hurt each other with surgical precision. The campground sat in a small clearing surrounded by trees so thick they seemed to swallow the afternoon light. A fire ring made of blackened stones marked the center, and a weathered picnic table leaned slightly to one side. The ranger station was 15 miles back down the mountain, and according to the map, we were the only reservation for the next 4 days. Perfect isolation. We set up quickly, Claire directing me where to level the trailer while she organized our supplies. By the time the sun began its descent behind the western ridge, we had a fire going and were nursing beers, watching sparks spiral up into the darkening sky. "This was a good idea," I said, reaching for her hand. She squeezed back, her smile tentative but genuine. Yeah, it was. That first night passed peacefully. We made love in the narrow bed, the trailer rocking gently, and afterward I lay awake listening to the river and Claire's soft breathing. The stars through the skylight were impossibly bright, like holes punched in black fabric with light bleeding through from some celestial realm beyond. I felt something in my chest unclench, a knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I woke the next morning to Claire's scream. I bolted upright, my heart hammering, fumbling for my glasses on the narrow shelf beside the bed. Claire stood at the trailer's small window, her face pressed against the glass, one hand covering her mouth. "Marcus," she whispered. "Marcus, look." I stumbled to her side, blinking sleep from my eyes. Through the window, I could see our campsite clearly in the morning light. The fire ring, the picnic table, our truck parked beside the trailer, and 20 feet away, set up in the exact same orientation as ours, was another travel trailer. It was identical. Same make, same model, same color, that distinctive cream and tan pattern with the curved retro lines. Even the license plate looked the same from this distance, though the angle made it hard to be certain. "That wasn't there yesterday," Claire said. Her voice had gone thin and high. "Maybe someone came in late last night," I offered, though my mouth had gone dry. "Maybe there was a mistake with the reservations. We would have heard them, Marcus. We would have heard their truck, heard them setting up." She turned to look at me, her eyes wide. "That's not just similar. That's identical. That's the exact same trailer." I pulled on my jeans and a shirt, my hands shaking slightly as I worked the buttons. "I'll go check it out. Maybe talk to whoever's over there." "I'm coming with you." We stepped out into the cool morning air. The forest was silent except for the river's constant white noise. No bird calls, no wind, just that endless susurration of water over stone. As we approached the duplicate trailer, details emerged that made my skin prickle. The small dent in the rear fender. We had the same dent from when I'd backed into a post at a rest stop. The faded sticker on the corner window, a cartoon bear that Claire had thought was cute at the rental place. Even the way the trailer sat, slightly lower on the right side, matched ours exactly. "This doesn't make sense," Claire whispered. "This is impossible." I knocked on the door. The sound seemed to be absorbed by the surrounding trees rather than echoing. No response. I knocked again, harder. "Hello? Anyone in there?" Silence. I tried the handle. It turned easily, and the door swung open with a familiar squeak. The exact same squeak our door made. The interior was dark, curtains drawn. I could make out the basic shapes: the bed, the kitchenette, the small table. Everything arranged exactly as we'd left ours. Claire gripped my arm, her nails digging in through my shirt. "Don't go in," she said. But I was already climbing the steps, drawn by a morbid curiosity that overrode my better judgment. The air inside smelled stale and faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. I reached for the light switch, my fingers finding it in the exact spot I'd expect. The light flickered on. Claire made a small strangled sound behind me. Our clothes hung in the narrow closet. Our toiletries were arranged on the small shelf above the sink. The book Claire had been reading, a thriller about a woman who disappears on a hiking trail, lay open on the table, a bookmark at the same page she'd reached last night. But something was wrong with the proportions. Everything looked slightly off, like a photograph that had been compressed or stretched in subtle ways. The bed seemed a few inches too long, the ceiling a bit too low. The angles didn't quite make sense when I looked at them directly. "We need to leave," Claire said. "We need to pack up and leave right now." I backed out of the duplicate trailer, my heart pounding. She was right. Whatever this was, some elaborate prank, some glitch in reality, some warning we didn't understand, we needed to go. We rushed back to our trailer and began throwing our things into bags. I was shoving clothes into a duffel when Claire's voice stopped me. "Marcus, the truck." I looked up. Through the window, I could see our pickup. And beside it, parked in the exact same orientation, was another truck. Same make, same model, same color, same mud spatters on the wheel wells. "No," I said. "No, that's not." I ran outside. The duplicate truck sat there, solid and real, its paint glinting in the morning sun. I walked around it, touching it to confirm it was actually there. The metal was warm under my palm. I tried the door, locked. I peered through the window. The interior matched ours perfectly. The same air freshener hanging from the mirror. The same receipts crumpled in the cup holder. The same crack in the windshield that I'd been meaning to get fixed for months. "This is insane," I said. "This is actually insane." Claire had her phone out, frantically tapping at the screen. "No signal. I'm not getting any signal. We're in a valley, remember? We knew there wouldn't be service. Then we drive. We drive until we get service and we call someone. The police, the ranger station, someone." I retrieved the keys from the trailer and we climbed into our truck. The original one, I hoped, though now I wasn't certain. The engine turned over with a reassuring rumble. I threw it into reverse and began backing up toward the narrow fire road that had brought us here. 50 feet down the road, I had to stop. Another truck blocked the path. Same make, same model, parked sideways across the track. "Go round it," Claire said. "There's enough room." But as I eased forward, trying to navigate past the obstacle, more vehicles appeared through the trees. Dozens of them. All identical to ours, parked at random angles, forming an impossible maze of duplicates that vanished into the forest in every direction. I put the truck in park, my hands trembling on the wheel. "This isn't real. This can't be real." Drive forward. Just drive forward through them. They can't all be solid. They can't all be real. I pressed the accelerator. The truck lurched forward. And then we hit something. A sickening crunch of metal on metal. The airbags deployed, knocking the wind from my lungs. When the white fabric deflated, I could see we'd struck one of the duplicate trucks head-on. Both vehicles looked real. Both had crumpled hoods steaming in the morning air. We stumbled out, coughing and disoriented. Claire had a small cut on her forehead, blood trickling down into her eyebrow. I grabbed our emergency pack from the back seat, water, first aid kit, flashlights, energy bars, and slung it over my shoulder. "We walk," I said. "We follow the road back to the ranger station." But the road had changed. Instead of the clear fire track we'd driven in on, the path branched and split, dividing into a dozen smaller trails that wound off through the trees in different directions. Each one looked well-worn, as if frequently traveled. Claire pressed a bandage to her forehead, her hands shaking. "Which way?" "We follow the river. It flows downhill. Eventually it'll take us out of here." We set off through the trees, pushing through undergrowth that seemed thicker than it had been yesterday. The morning sun angled through the canopy in dusty shafts, but the light felt wrong. Too dim, too greenish, as if we were underwater. After 20 minutes of walking, we emerged into a clearing. Our campsite, the trailer, the fire ring, the picnic table. "No," Claire said. "No, we've been walking away from it. We've been walking in a straight line." But there it was, impossible to deny. I pulled out my compass, checked the bearing. We'd been heading northeast, away from where we'd started. But somehow, we'd circled back. "Maybe there's a hill, some kind of optical illusion," I said, knowing it sounded ridiculous. "We'll try again. We'll mark our path this time." I used my pocket knife to blaze marks into the tree trunks as we walked, cutting away bark to expose the pale wood underneath. We moved more carefully this time, checking the compass every few minutes, making sure we maintained our bearing. 30 minutes later, we emerged into the same clearing. Our marks were there on the trees, leading directly into the campsite. Claire sat down heavily on the picnic table, her face ashen. "We're trapped. We're trapped here, and I don't know how or why." I wanted to argue, to find some rational explanation, but my mind kept returning to the duplicate trailer, the duplicate truck, the impossible multiplication of our possessions. Something had gone fundamentally wrong with this place. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Okay, we stay put then. We conserve our supplies and we wait. The ranger station knows we're here. When we don't check out, they'll send someone." "When's checkout?" 4 days. Claire laughed, a brittle sound on the edge of hysteria. 4 days. We spent the afternoon trying different approaches. We followed the river, only to find it looped back on itself in ways that violated basic geography. We tried cutting straight through the forest, but no matter how far we walked, the clearing always appeared ahead, drawing us back like a gravitational well. As the sun began to set, exhausted and frightened, we returned to our trailer. The duplicate still sat there, silent and empty, a mirror reflecting something we couldn't quite comprehend. That night, we barricaded ourselves inside, pushing the small table against the door. Claire sat on the bed with her knees drawn up to her chest, staring at nothing. I tried the truck's radio, scanning through static for any hint of a signal. Nothing but white noise and occasionally, buried deep in the hiss, something that might have been breathing. Around midnight, I heard the first sounds. Footsteps, circling the trailer. Slow, deliberate, crunching through the pine needles and dry leaves. Claire heard them too, her eyes going wide in the darkness. The footsteps stopped at our door. I held my breath, waiting. Then came a soft sound, the handle turning, testing the lock. The door pushed inward slightly against the table we'd wedged there. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. No answer. Just another push against the door, harder this time. The table scraped a few inches across the floor. "We have weapons," I lied. "We'll defend ourselves." The pushing stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the footsteps resumed, circling around toward the window. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it through the glass. Nothing. No one there. But the footsteps continued, clearly audible, moving around the trailer's perimeter. Around and around, never stopping, never varying in pace. "It's trying to wear us down," Claire whispered. "It wants us to open the door." "It?" She looked at me, her face hollow in the flashlight's beam. "Whatever's doing this, whatever brought us here." The circling continued all night. Neither of us slept. When dawn finally broke, the footsteps stopped abruptly, cutting off mid-stride. We waited until full daylight before venturing outside. The ground around the trailer was churned up, as if dozens of people had walked in circles for hours. But there were no clear footprints, just disturbed earth and scattered pine needles. The duplicate trailer was gone. In its place stood a tent. Our tent, the one we kept in the storage unit at home, the one we hadn't brought on this trip because we'd rented the trailer instead. "Marcus," Claire said, her voice hollow. That tent has been in storage for 2 years. I approached it slowly. The fabric was slightly faded, exactly as I remembered. The zipper pull had the same bent tab. When I knelt and looked inside, I saw our old sleeping bags, the ones with the worn spots from years of camping trips before we'd gotten comfortable and switched to hotels. "It's bringing things from our past," I said. "Or from other places. I don't know which." More structures had appeared throughout the clearing. A small pop-up camper we'd borrowed from Claire's parents on our honeymoon. A dome tent I'd had in college. Even a blanket fort that made my chest tighten. The exact configuration I'd built as a kid in my parents' living room. Blue sheets draped over chairs in a specific pattern I hadn't thought about in decades. "It's remembering us," Claire said. "Or we're remembering ourselves." "That doesn't make sense." "None of this makes sense." Her voice rose, edged with panic. "We're trapped in some kind of loop, Marcus, and it's filling up with our past. And I don't know what happens when it runs out of past to pull from." That's when we heard the voices. Distant at first, coming from the trees. Conversational tones, too muffled to make out words. Multiple people talking over each other. The sounds grew gradually louder, approaching from all directions simultaneously. We scrambled back into the trailer, slamming the door. I peered through the window, trying to see who was coming. Figures emerged from the tree line. Dozens of them, walking in that same slow, deliberate pace as the footsteps from last night. As they drew closer, details resolved with sickening clarity. They were us, not identical. Each one was slightly different, wearing clothes from various periods of our lives. I saw myself at 20, skinny and long-haired, wearing the leather jacket I'd saved up for in college. Myself at 30, heavier, in the button-down shirt from my first real job. Myself at 16, acne-scarred and hunched with adolescent awkwardness. And Claire. So many Claires. The girl I'd met at a party junior year, bright-eyed and laughing. The woman who'd sobbed in my arms after the miscarriage, pale and hollowed out. The bride in her vintage dress, radiant and perfect. They all walked toward the trailer, faces blank, movements synchronized like marionettes pulled by the same strings. "This isn't happening," Claire whispered beside me. "This is a hallucination. Carbon monoxide or something, a gas leak." But they kept coming. The circle of duplicates tightened around our trailer, moving in perfect unison. When they were close enough, they all stopped simultaneously and turned to face us. And then they smiled. Every face wearing the same expression. Not quite right, too wide, teeth showing too much. Eyes focused but empty, like mannequins animated by something that had studied human expression without understanding it. They raised their hands in unison and knocked on the trailer walls. All of them. All at once. The sound was deafening. A thunderous percussion that made the whole structure shake. "Make it stop," Claire was crying now, hands over her ears. "Please make it stop." The knocking intensified, became faster, more frantic. The trailer rocked on its frame. I grabbed Claire and held her, feeling her whole body trembling against mine. Through the windows I could see the duplicates pounding with both fists, their expressions never changing, still wearing those horrible smiles. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the knocking stopped. Silence crashed down. I risked a look through the window. They were still there, standing motionless, hands at their sides. But now their heads had all tilted at the same angle, regarding the trailer with an alien curiosity. As I watched, every duplicate's jaw began to unhinge, mouths gaping open wider and wider, far beyond what should have been anatomically possible. A sound emerged. From every open mouth simultaneously. A low, vibrating hum that I felt in my bones. The pitch rose slowly, climbing into registers that made my teeth ache. The windows began to rattle. The trailer's metal walls hummed in resonance. "Cover your ears," I shouted, but could barely hear my own voice over the rising tone. Something in my head felt like it was tearing. Blood trickled from my nose. Beside me, Claire had gone rigid, her eyes rolled back, a thin line of red leaking from one ear. The sound cut off. The duplicates were gone. The clearing was empty except for the scattered shelters from our past, standing silent in the morning light. I checked Claire's pulse, rapid but steady. I shook her gently, and her eyes focused, swimming back to awareness. "What happened?" she asked. "I don't know. They were here, and then they weren't." We spent the rest of that day in a state of numb shock, barely speaking, rationing water and energy bars. I kept checking the mirrors, terrified I'd see duplicates of us inside the trailer, but we remained alone. As night fell again, I realized something had changed. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe, as if the atmosphere was slowly congealing around us. When I exhaled, I could see my breath, though it wasn't particularly cold. "Marcus," Claire said, "look at your hands." I held them up in the flashlight beam. My skin looked wrong, slightly translucent, as if I could see the shadow of bones and veins beneath. When I pressed my palms together, there was a moment of resistance, like pushing through plastic wrap before they met. "It's happening to me, too," Claire whispered, showing me her arms. "The same translucent quality, the same sense of becoming less solid." "We're fading," I said. "We're being absorbed or copied or I don't know what. We have to do something. We can't just wait here." "What can we do? We can't leave. We can't call for help." "The fire," she interrupted. "We haven't tried burning it down." I stared at her. Burning what down? All of it. The trailer, the tent, everything. Maybe if we destroy the copies, we break whatever's doing this. It was desperate, possibly insane, but it was the first proactive idea either of us had had. We gathered everything flammable we could find: clothes, bedding, the contents of the emergency kit. I emptied our spare gas can over the nearest tent, then moved to the pop-up camper, dousing it with the remaining fuel. Claire lit a branch in the fire ring and handed it to me. "Together? Together?" We touched flame to fabric. The fire caught immediately, racing across the gas-soaked canvas with a hungry roar. Within minutes, the tent was fully engulfed. We moved to the next structure, then the next, methodically burning through our past. The fire spread faster than it should have, jumping between structures despite the distance separating them. Soon, the entire clearing was illuminated by dancing flames, shadows writhing across the tree line. Smoke rose in thick columns toward the star-filled sky. As the duplicate trailer began to burn, something changed in the quality of the night. The air shimmered, and for a moment I saw through it, glimpsed something vast and dark pressing against the fabric of what I'd thought was reality, something that noticed us noticing it. The flames turned blue, then violet, then a color I have no name for, a hue that hurt to perceive. The fire began to burn in reverse, flames flowing downward instead of up, pulling heat from the air rather than releasing it. The shelters weren't burning away, they were multiplying. Each structure that burned split into 2, then 4, then dozens, spreading across the clearing in an accelerating cascade. Within seconds, hundreds of tents and trailers and makeshift shelters crowded the space, overlapping and interpenetrating, creating impossible geometries that made my eyes water. "Run," I said. "Just run." We fled into the forest, crashing through undergrowth, branches whipping at our faces. Behind us, the clearing was now a solid mass of structures, still multiplying, beginning to spread into the trees like a crystalline growth consuming everything in its path. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs gave out, collapsing finally in a small depression between 2 massive roots. The sound of the spreading structures was a constant crashing, like dominoes falling in all directions simultaneously. When I could breathe again, I looked at Claire. In the moonlight filtering through the canopy, she was barely visible. Her body, now so translucent I could see the tree trunk behind her through her torso. "Marcus," she said, her voice coming from very far away despite being right beside me. I can't feel my fingers. I looked down at my own hands. They were almost gone, just ghostly outlines shimmering in the darkness. We were disappearing, being edited out of reality one layer at a time. "I love you," I managed to say. I should have said it more. I should have... "I know," she said. "I love you too. I'm sorry for all the things I..." Her voice faded mid-sentence. When I reached for her, my hand passed through empty air. I was alone. "Claire!" I screamed into the night. "Claire!" The only answer was the sound of structures still spreading through the forest, and beneath it, a new sound. Footsteps approaching from all directions. Slow. Deliberate. Multiple sets converging on my position. I tried to stand, to run again, but my legs wouldn't support me. Looking down, I realized they were no longer entirely there. I could see the ground through my shins, see roots and rocks that should have been hidden by flesh and bone. The footsteps grew closer. Figures materialized from the darkness. More duplicates, but wrong, somehow. Corrupted. They wore our faces, but scrambled. Features rearranged into configurations that were almost but not quite human. Some had too many eyes. Others had mouths where mouths shouldn't be. They surrounded me, these broken copies, and when they spoke it was with Claire's voice, but coming from a dozen mouths at once, overlapping and out of sync. Marcus, 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 Marcus. The name repeated, echoing through the trees, through my skull, through the very air. I felt myself fragmenting, splitting along fault lines I hadn't known existed. There were multiple versions of me now. I could feel them. Copies spreading out through the forest, through time, through possibilities. One version ran and was caught by the duplicates, pulled apart like taffy. Another version stayed and became one of them, his face smoothing into that blank smile. Another found Claire, or something wearing Claire's face, and they walked together into a clearing that went on forever. But this version, the one that feels most real, though I can no longer trust that perception, this version simply faded, became translucent, then transparent, then less than a ghost, a memory of a person who once existed, now existing only as a probability, a might have been. I'm still here in a way, still in the Payette National Forest, still trapped in that clearing. I can see the trailer sometimes when the light hits right. I can see Claire moving inside it, or something that was Claire once. We go through the motions of our camping trip, over and over, a loop that plays eternally. Sometimes other campers come. I watch them set up, watch them discover the duplicate tent or trailer, watch the realization dawn. I want to warn them, but I have no voice. I'm less than a whisper, less than a thought. They always try to leave. They always come back. The forest brings them back, pulls them in, begins the process of copying and fragmenting and absorbing. Some resist longer than others. Some give in quickly, accepting their new existence as echoes. I've learned things in my formless state. The forest isn't haunted. It's hunting. It's a trap, or maybe a stomach, digesting reality itself. The duplicates aren't copies. They're possibilities made solid, alternate versions crystallizing out of the quantum foam. When you stay too long, when you notice the wrong things, you become quantum too, smeared across multiple states, unable to collapse into a single reality. Claire is here somewhere, I think, scattered across 1,000 different versions of that clearing. Sometimes I feel her nearby, a familiar warmth in the cold recursion. Sometimes I think I hear her calling my name, but I can't respond. I can barely remember who I was before I became this. A ghost haunting his own unfocused death. New campers just pulled up. A young couple, laughing, excited about their weekend away from the city. They're setting up their tent right now, exactly where ours was. I can see it already. The duplicate tent that will appear in the night, the confusion that will blossom into panic, the futile attempts to escape. I want to scream at them to leave. I want to manifest, to warn them somehow. But I'm too dispersed now, too fragmented. I can only watch as the forest begins its work, as the first impossible details start appearing at the edges of their perception. They'll understand soon enough. They'll try to run. They'll discover, as we did, that some places don't let you leave. Some places absorb you, copy you, spread you so thin across possibility that you become part of the landscape itself. The forest is patient. The forest is hungry. The forest remembers everything that enters it and makes sure nothing ever truly leaves. I am Marcus. I'm 34. I came to the Payette National Forest to save my marriage and lost everything instead. And I'm still here. Always here. watching, waiting, fading into less than nothing while the forest grows fat on the reality of everyone who makes the mistake of thinking they're just camping for a weekend. The couple is arguing now. She's pointing at something I can't quite see yet. He's checking his phone, confused by the lack of signal. It's starting again. It always starts again. Story 2. I'm Hazel, 34. I woke at Devil's Backbone Wilderness in the Mark Twain National Forest with ash on my hands. That's not how the trip was supposed to start. None of this was supposed to happen the way it did. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and if I'm going to tell this, if I'm going to get it all out before whatever's left of my mind caves in completely, I need to start from the beginning. My sister Jenna talked me into the RV trip. She'd bought this beat-up 1987 Southwind motorhome off Craigslist for $3,000, some retirement project from an old couple in Springfield who'd given up on their travel dreams. Jenna was always like that, impulsive, optimistic, convinced that adventure was just one bad decision away. She was 29, 5 years younger than me, and she had this way of making everything sound possible. "Come on, Hayes," she'd said over the phone. "When's the last time you did something spontaneous? You're turning into Mom." That stung because it was true. After the divorce, after Eric took the house and the dog and half my sanity, I'd spent 2 years in a studio apartment in St. Louis, working from home for an insurance company, ordering takeout, watching the same shows on repeat. My therapist said I was avoidant. I said I was tired, but Jenna persisted, and eventually I agreed. Just the two of us, she promised. A week in the Mark Twain National Forest, specifically the Devil's Backbone Wilderness area, a 6,600-acre slice of Missouri backcountry known for its rugged terrain and isolation. Jenna had found a primitive camping spot near the Ozark Trail, accessible by a rough forest road that dead-ended at a clearing big enough for the RV. No hookups, no facilities, just us and the trees. "It'll be good for you," she'd said. "Fresh air, no internet, just sisters being sisters." We left St. Louis on a Tuesday morning in late October, the RV coughing and rattling down Highway 8 through the autumn countryside. The vehicle smelled like old coffee and motor oil, and the steering pulled hard to the left. But Jenna drove with both hands on the wheel and a smile on her face, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd packed enough supplies for a month: canned goods, bottled water, a first aid kit that could stock a small clinic, 2 sleeping bags rated for sub-zero temperatures even though the forecast promised mild 50s. "You always overpack," I'd said, watching her load the RV. "And you never pack enough," she'd shot back. "Remember Branson?" I did remember Branson. I'd forgotten sunscreen, bug spray, and a jacket, and I'd spent the entire weekend sunburned, bitten, and shivering. Jenna had a point. The drive took about 3 hours. We turned off the main highway onto County Road 4420, then onto an unmarked forest road that turned to gravel, then to dirt, then to something that was barely a road at all, just 2 rutted tracks through thick woods. The trees closed in overhead, oak and hickory and cedar, their branches forming a canopy that blocked most of the afternoon sun. Jenna had to navigate around fallen logs and deep washouts, the RV lurching and groaning with every obstacle. "You sure this thing can make it?" I asked, gripping the dashboard. "Faith, Hazel, have a little faith." We reached the clearing around 4 in the afternoon. It was exactly as the online forum had described, a roughly circular space maybe 40 feet across, surrounded by dense forest on all sides. The ground was covered in fallen leaves, thick and rustling, and there was a fire ring made of blackened stones in the center. Someone had left a rotting picnic table near the tree line, its wood soft and splintered. Jenna backed the RV into position, killed the engine, and stretched her arms over her head. "Home sweet home," she said. I stepped outside and immediately felt the silence. Not quiet, silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums that makes you aware of your own breathing. No birds, no insects, no distant traffic hum. Just the wind moving through the trees, a soft susurration that sounded almost like whispering. "It's really isolated," I said. "That's the point." Jenna was already pulling out camping chairs, setting them up near the fire ring. No people, no noise, no distractions, just nature. I walked to the edge of the clearing and looked into the woods. The trees were packed tight, their trunks dark and gnarled, and the underbrush was thick with thorny vines and dead vegetation. I couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction before everything dissolved into shadow. Something about the density of it made my chest tighten. Not quite claustrophobia, but close. "How far are we from the nearest ranger station?" I asked. "About 12 miles. Why? Planning an escape already?" Jenna laughed, but I didn't. We spent the rest of the afternoon setting up camp. Jenna got the RV leveled and the water system primed. I gathered firewood from the edge of the clearing, picking up fallen branches and stacking them near the fire ring. The wood felt strange in my hands, dry but somehow greasy, leaving a residue on my palms that I couldn't quite wipe off. I told myself it was just sap or fungus, something natural. By the time the sun started to set, we had a fire going and dinner cooking, just canned chili heated over the flames. We sat in our camping chairs, eating from paper bowls, watching the light drain out of the sky. The darkness came fast in the forest, swallowing the trees and the clearing until the only light was the orange glow of the fire. "This is nice," Jenna said. "Isn't this nice?" "Yeah," I said, though something in my stomach felt wrong. Not the chili, something else, a tightness, a sense of anticipation. That night I couldn't sleep. The RV's bed was narrow and lumpy, and every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was falling. I lay there listening to Jenna's soft breathing from the bunk above me, listening to the wind outside, listening to the creaks and pops of the RV settling. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to use the tiny bathroom. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want to wake Jenna, so I navigated by feel, my hands trailing along the narrow walls. When I looked out the window above the sink, I saw the clearing bathed in moonlight, the fire ring just a pile of cold ash. And I saw footprints. They circled the RV in a perfect loop, pressed into the soft earth. Small prints, like a child's bare feet. They came from the woods, circled the RV 3 times, and then disappeared back into the trees. My heart started pounding. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to see better, but the moonlight was weak and the shadows too deep. The footprints were definitely there. I could see the way the soil was compressed, the 5-toed shape of each step. I told myself it was an animal, a raccoon, maybe, or a possum, but the prints were too human, too deliberate. I went back to bed but didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds outside, footsteps, breathing, anything, but there was only silence. When I woke the next morning, I had ash on my hands. Not just a little ash. My palms were coated in it, thick and gray like I'd been digging through a fireplace. There was ash under my fingernails, ash on my forearms, even a smudge of it on my cheek when I looked in the mirror. "Jenna," I said, climbing out of bed. My voice sounded strange, hoarse like I'd been screaming. "Jenna, wake up." She stirred, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong?" I held up my hands. "Look." She stared at them, then at me. "Did you go outside?" "No. I mean, I got up to use the bathroom, but I didn't leave the RV." "Then how?" "I don't know." We both went outside. The fire ring was cold and undisturbed, the ash from last night's fire still piled in the center. But when I looked at my hands again, the ash was gone. My palms were clean, no trace of gray. I rubbed them together, checked under my nails. Nothing. "You were probably dreaming," Jenna said, though she didn't sound convinced. "Sleepwalking, maybe." I don't sleepwalk. First time for everything. But I knew I hadn't been sleepwalking. I remembered waking up, remembered the feel of the ash on my skin, gritty and dry. And I remembered the footprints. I walked around the RV, looking for them, but the ground was covered in leaves and the soil too hard to show prints clearly. If they'd been there, they were gone now. Jenna made coffee on the camp stove, and we sat outside in the morning light, drinking from chipped mugs. The forest looked different in daylight, less oppressive, more ordinary. Birds called from the trees, and somewhere in the distance I heard the faint sound of running water. "Maybe we should explore a little," Jenna suggested. "There's supposed to be a creek about a mile north. We could hike up there, stretch our legs." I didn't want to leave the clearing. I wanted to pack up the RV and drive back to St. Louis, back to my safe, boring studio apartment. But I also didn't want to be the sister who ruined everything, who couldn't handle a few days in the woods. "Sure," I said. "Let's go." We packed light, just water bottles, a trail map, and Jenna's phone for photos, though there was no signal out here. The trail started at the north edge of the clearing, a narrow path that wound through the trees. The undergrowth was thick, and we had to push through branches and vines that seemed to reach for us, scratching at our clothes. The forest felt wrong. I can't explain it better than that. The trees were too quiet, too still, and the air had a weight to it, pressing down on my shoulders. Every few steps I had the sensation of being watched, but when I turned around, there was nothing but trees and shadows. "You okay?" Jenna asked. She was a few steps ahead, her phone out, snapping pictures of mushrooms and moss-covered logs. "Yeah," I lied. We hiked for maybe 20 minutes before we found the creek. It was shallow and clear, running over smooth stones, and Jenna knelt down to splash water on her face. "God, that's cold," she said, laughing. I stayed back, looking around. There was something carved into a tree near the creek, letters gouged into the bark. I walked closer, squinting at the marks. "Turn back." The letters were old, the bark grown over them in places, but the words were clear. "Jenna," I said, "look at this." She came over, still dripping water. Probably just some kids screwing around. You know how people are. They see a remote spot and think they need to leave their mark. It says, "Turn back." "Yeah, I can read." She touched the carving, running her fingers over the rough bark. "It's old. Don't worry about it." But I was worried. Because the carving wasn't the only thing. There were more symbols scratched into the surrounding trees, crude shapes that might have been letters or just random marks. And hanging from one of the branches was a small bundle of sticks tied together with what looked like hair. "What the hell is that?" I said, pointing. Jenna looked up. "Some kind of charm. Maybe someone was doing a survival course out here." "That's hair, Jenna. Human hair." She pulled the bundle down and examined it. The sticks were bound with strands of dark hair, knotted tight, and there was a smell coming from it. Something rotten and sweet, like dead flowers. "Okay, that's creepy," she admitted. "But it's probably just what? Just some harmless, creepy thing in the middle of nowhere?" "Let's head back," she said, dropping the bundle. "We've seen enough." We hiked back faster than we'd come, neither of us speaking. The silence between us was worse than the silence of the forest. By the time we reached the clearing, the sun was high and the air was warm, but I felt cold all over. That afternoon, things started to go wrong. First, the RV's battery died. Jenna tried to start the engine to charge it, but nothing happened. Just a clicking sound, like the starter was gone. She checked the connections, checked the fuses, but everything looked fine. "It was working yesterday," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I don't understand." Then the camp stove stopped working. The propane tank was full, but the burner wouldn't light no matter how many times Jenna tried. We ended up eating cold canned beans for lunch, sitting in silence. "Bad luck," Jenna said, but she didn't sound like she believed it. That evening, we tried to build a fire in the fire ring, but the wood wouldn't catch. Jenna used half a bottle of lighter fluid, and the flames would sputter and die almost immediately. The wood would blacken and smoke, but it wouldn't burn. "This is insane," Jenna said, throwing the lighter down. "What the hell is wrong with this place?" I didn't answer. I was staring at the trees, at the way the shadows seemed to move between them, shifting and coiling like living things. "Hazel?" "I want to leave," I said. "We can't. The battery's dead, remember? And even if we could jumpstart it, we're 12 miles from the nearest road on a trail that'll tear the axle off if we're not careful." "Then we hike out." "In the dark? Through 12 miles of forest? Are you kidding?" She was right, of course. We were stuck. That night I heard the footsteps again. I was lying in bed, wide awake, listening to the wind. And then I heard them. Soft, padding sounds on the ground outside the RV. Walking in circles, around and around, the rhythm steady and deliberate. I wanted to wake Jenna, but I couldn't move. I lay there frozen, listening to the footsteps circle the RV once, twice, 3 times, and then they stopped. I waited in the darkness, my heart slamming against my ribs. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. And then I heard breathing, right outside the window next to my head. Slow, wet breathing, like someone standing just inches away on the other side of the glass. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed for it to go away. After what felt like hours, the breathing stopped, and I heard the footsteps again, moving back into the forest. In the morning, I had ash on my hands again. This time, Jenna saw it too. I woke up and held out my palms, and she stared at them, her face pale. "What the fuck, Hazel?" "I don't know." "Did you go outside?" "No." "Then how?" "I don't know." My voice cracked, and suddenly I was crying, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. Jenna wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. "It's okay," she said, but I could hear the fear in her voice. "We're going to be okay." But we weren't. That morning, Jenna tried to hike out to get help. She packed a backpack with water and snacks, put on her hiking boots, and headed down the trail toward the forest road. I stayed behind, too scared to leave the RV, watching her disappear into the trees. She was gone for 6 hours. I spent the time sitting in the RV, staring out the windows, waiting. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. It felt like the world had stopped, like I was the only person left alive. When Jenna finally came back, she looked wrong. She stumbled into the clearing, her clothes torn and dirty, her face scratched. But it wasn't the physical damage that scared me. It was her eyes. They were too wide, too blank, like she was looking through me instead of at me. "Jenna." I ran to her, grabbing her shoulders. "What happened? Where were you?" "I walked," she said, her voice flat. "I walked and walked, but I kept ending up back here. The trail just loops." "That's impossible." "I know." She pulled away from me and walked to the RV, moving stiffly like a puppet. "I'm going to lie down." She climbed into the RV and shut the door behind her. I stood there in the clearing, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on me. That night, I woke up to find Jenna standing over me. The moonlight came through the window, illuminating her face, and I saw that she was smiling. Not a normal smile, something too wide, too fixed, her teeth catching the light. "Jenna," I whispered. She didn't respond. She just stood there staring down at me with that horrible smile. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. "Jenna, you're scaring me." She tilted her head to one side, the movement jerky and unnatural. And then she spoke, but it wasn't her voice. It was something higher, thinner, like a child trying to imitate an adult. "We've been waiting for you," she said. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the wall. "What did you say?" "We've been waiting, watching. You came to our place and now you have to stay. This isn't funny, Jenna. Stop it." But she didn't stop. She reached out with one hand, her fingers trembling, and touched my face. Her skin was ice cold, and when I looked down I saw ash on her fingertips. "You're marked now," she said, "just like me." I shoved her away and bolted for the door, stumbling out into the clearing. The night air was frigid, and my breath came out in white clouds. I ran to the fire ring and fell to my knees, gasping for air. When I looked back at the RV, Jenna was standing in the doorway, still smiling. "Hazel," she called, her voice normal again. "What are you doing? Come back inside. Stay away from me. Hazel, it's me. It's Jenna. I don't know what you think you saw, but you weren't you. You said we were marked." She stepped down from the RV, moving slowly, her hands raised. "I was sleepwalking. You know I do that sometimes. I'm sorry if I scared you." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But I couldn't forget the way she'd looked, the way she'd sounded. "Show me your hands," I said. She held them out. They were clean, no ash, no dirt. "See? I'm fine. You're fine. We're both just exhausted and freaked out. Let's go back inside and get some rest." I let her lead me back to the RV, but I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with my eyes open, listening to her breathing above me, wondering if it was really her. The next day, things got worse. I woke up with ash on my hands again, but this time it was everywhere. On my face, in my hair, smeared across the sheets, and when I looked at Jenna, I saw ash on her too, though she didn't seem to notice. "We need to leave," I said, "right now. We'll walk out if we have to." "Okay," she said too quickly. "Okay, let's go." We packed a single backpack with water and supplies, and we started walking. The trail was overgrown, harder to follow than before, but we pushed through. We walked for hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky, the air growing warmer. And then we were back at the clearing. "No," I said, staring at the RV. "No, that's impossible. We walked north the entire time." Jenna dropped the backpack. "We're going in circles." "Then we'll go a different direction, east or west or—" "It doesn't matter, Hazel. Don't you get it? We're not supposed to leave." I grabbed her arm. "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that." She pulled away, and when she looked at me, I saw that her eyes were different again. Darker, emptier. "I think I've been here before," she said quietly. "I think I've always been here. Stop it." I remember now. I remember walking through the trees, and someone calling my name, and then nothing. Just ash and darkness. "Jenna, you're scaring me." She smiled that horrible smile again. "You should be scared. Because you're next." I ran. I didn't think, didn't plan. I just ran into the woods, crashing through the underbrush, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. I could hear Jenna behind me, calling my name, but her voice sounded wrong, layered, like multiple people speaking at once. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, and then I collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The forest was completely dark now, the sun gone, and I realized I'd been running for hours. And then I heard the children. They were singing, soft and melodic, somewhere in the trees. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them clearly. A dozen small voices, all singing the same tuneless song. "Ashes, ashes. We all fall down." I pressed my hands over my ears, but the singing didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, until it felt like they were singing right next to me. "Ashes, ashes. We all fall down." I opened my eyes and saw them. They stood in a circle around me, maybe 15 of them, small figures in ragged clothes. Their faces were pale and streaked with ash, and their eyes were black. Not just the pupils, but the entire eye, like looking into empty sockets. "Please," I whispered. "Please don't hurt me." They stopped singing, and then, as one, they turned and walked back into the trees, disappearing into the darkness. I don't know how long I sat there. Time felt wrong, stretched out and compressed at the same time. Eventually, I forced myself to stand and started walking again. I found the clearing just before dawn. The RV was there, and Jenna was sitting by the fire ring staring into the cold ashes. "You came back," she said when she saw me. Her voice was normal again, tired and sad. "I couldn't find a way out. There isn't one. Not for us." I sat down next to her, too exhausted to argue. We sat there in silence as the sun came up, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "What happened to you?" I asked finally. "When you went to get help, what really happened?" She didn't look at me. I saw them. The children. They were waiting on the trail, and they told me this place takes people. It's been taking people for a long time, and once you're marked, you can't leave. "Marked with ash?" "Yeah." I looked down at my hands. They were clean now, but I could still feel the ghost of the ash on my skin. "So, what do we do?" Jenna finally looked at me, and I saw tears on her face. "I don't think we have a choice." That night, Jenna disappeared. I fell asleep in the RV, and when I woke up, she was gone. The door was open, swinging gently in the wind, and her shoes were still by the entrance. I called her name, searched the clearing, but she was nowhere. And then I saw the footprints, dozens of them, small and bare, leading from the RV into the woods. I followed them. The trail of footprints led deep into the forest, weaving between trees and over fallen logs. I walked for what felt like hours, following the prints by the light of my phone, my battery draining fast. Eventually, I came to a clearing I'd never seen before. It was larger than our campsite, and in the center was a pile of stones arranged in a circle, and standing around the stones were the children. They held hands, forming a ring, and in the center of the ring was Jenna. She was kneeling, her hands pressed to the ground, and ash was pouring from her mouth like smoke. It spilled out in thick clouds, and where it touched the ground, the earth turned black. "Jenna!" I screamed. The children turned to look at me, their black eyes gleaming, and they smiled. One of them, a little girl with tangled hair, stepped forward. "She's ours now," she said in that strange, layered voice. She answered the call. She accepted the ash. "No!" I ran toward them, but the air grew thick, solid, like I was pushing through invisible walls. I couldn't get closer than 10 feet before the pressure became too much. Jenna lifted her head and looked at me. Ash covered her face, her hair, her clothes, and when she opened her mouth to speak, more ash poured out. "Run," she tried to say, but the word dissolved into smoke. And then she collapsed, and the ash consumed her completely, pulling her down into the earth like it was quicksand. In seconds, she was gone. Nothing left but a pile of gray ash that scattered in the wind. The children laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of bone, and then they faded away, dissolving into the darkness. I ran. I ran back through the forest, back to the clearing, back to the RV. I climbed inside and locked the door, curling up in the corner, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. I stayed there for 2 days, maybe 3. Time didn't work right anymore. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just sat there waiting for them to come for me. But they didn't come. On what might have been the 4th morning, I heard voices outside, real voices, adults calling out, asking if anyone was there. I stumbled to the door and opened it. 2 park rangers stood at the edge of the clearing, their uniforms clean and official. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I tried to speak, but nothing came out. One of the rangers came closer, concerned, and I saw him looking at my hands. "Ma'am, you're injured. We need to get you to a hospital." I looked down at my hands. They were covered in ash. Thick, gray ash that wouldn't come off no matter how hard I rubbed. The rangers helped me out of the clearing, down the trail to a truck waiting on the forest road. They asked me questions. Where was my sister? What happened? How long had I been out here? But I couldn't answer. Every time I tried to speak, ash filled my mouth. They took me to a hospital in Rolla. The doctors cleaned me up, ran tests, asked more questions. I told them everything, but I don't think they believed me. They said I was dehydrated, suffering from exposure and stress. They said my sister probably wandered off and got lost, and they'd send search teams. They never found her. I spent a week in the hospital, and when they released me, I went back to St. Louis, back to my studio apartment, back to my job, back to my life. But I'm not the same. Every morning, I wake up with ash on my hands. I wash it off in the sink, scrub until my skin is raw, but it always comes back. And at night, I hear singing. Soft, childlike voices singing about ashes and falling down. I haven't told anyone. What would I say? That I left my sister in the woods to be consumed by ghost children? That I'm marked by something I don't understand? Sometimes I think about going back to Devil's Backbone. Maybe if I return, I can find Jenna. Maybe I can save her, or at least understand what happened. But I know the truth. She's gone, and I'm next. The ash is spreading. It's not just on my hands anymore. It's on my arms, my chest, creeping up my neck. I can taste it when I breathe, feel it coating my lungs like smoke. I don't have much time, so I'm writing this down, getting it all out, because I need someone to know what happened. I need someone to understand that the woods aren't empty. They're full of things that watch and wait, things that call your name in the dark and mark you with ash that never washes off. If you're reading this, don't go to Devil's Backbone Wilderness. Don't camp in remote clearings or follow trails that loop back on themselves. And if you wake up with ash on your hands, run. Run as far and as fast as you can, because once you're marked, there's no escape. They're waiting for you. They're always waiting. And when they sing their song, you'll answer. I can hear them now, outside my apartment window. Children's voices, soft and sweet, singing about ashes and falling down. The ash is in my mouth, on my tongue, filling my throat. I'm going to open the window. I'm going to answer the call, because I'm so tired of running, and the ash promises rest. It promises an end to the fear, an end to the questions. It promises Jenna. So I'm going. I'm opening the window and letting them in. And when you find this, if you find this, remember what I said. Don't go to the woods. Don't answer the call. And if you wake up with ash on your hands, run. Story 3. I'm Elijah. I'm 32. I followed fireflies into the Sipsey Wilderness in the Bankhead National Forest, Alabama. And they spelled my name. I should have known better. I'd been camping alone for years, always seeking that perfect silence you can only find deep in the backcountry where cell towers don't reach and the closest human is miles away. My old Winnebago wasn't much to look at, rust eating through the wheel wells and the engine coughing like a dying animal, but it was mine. I'd parked it at the trailhead near Thompson Creek, planning to spend a week hiking the sandstone canyons and sleeping under stars that actually looked like stars instead of distant highway lights. The Sipsey had a reputation, not the kind you read about in travel brochures, but the kind whispered by locals who grew up in the shadows of those ancient hemlocks. The ranger who sold me the permit was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back tight and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. "Staying long?" she asked, though she could clearly see the date I'd written on the form. "Week or so. Just me." She nodded slowly, then tapped the map with one finger. "Stay on marked trails. Sun sets early in the canyon this time of year, and if you see lights moving through the trees at night—" She paused, seemed to reconsider. "Just stay in your vehicle." I'd laughed it off then. Every park has its ghost stories, its local legends meant to spook tourists and give teenage kids something to dare each other about around campfires. I'd heard them all. The phantom hitchhiker on Route 66, the woman in white who walks the Blue Ridge Parkway, the children who drowned in Lake Superior and pull swimmers down to join them. But I'd never heard one about fireflies. The first 2 days passed beautifully. I hiked the trails that wound along the canyon rim, watching turkey vultures circle the updrafts and listening to the distant rush of water over stone. The forest here was old in a way that made you feel small, hemlocks towering 200 feet above the ravines, their bark thick and furrowed like elephant skin. Moss grew in thick carpets on the north-facing slopes, and the air tasted of decomposition and life happening all at once. I ate simple meals cooked on my camp stove and read paperback westerns until the light failed. At night, I'd hear the usual sounds: owls calling territory, the rustle of raccoons investigating my trash, the occasional crack of a branch as deer moved through the underbrush. Normal, peaceful. It wasn't until the third night that things changed. I'd made camp in a small clearing about a mile from where I'd parked the RV, wanting to experience a night out under the open sky. My tent was a small 2-person affair, and I'd spread my sleeping bag on top of a foam pad that did little to cushion the roots beneath. I'd let my fire burn down to coals and was about to zip myself in for the night when I saw the first one. A firefly. Just one, blinking green-gold against the darkness between the trees. Nothing unusual about that. It was late September, a bit late in the season for them, but not unheard of. I watched it pulse twice, 3 times, then drift deeper into the forest. Then another appeared, and another. Within minutes, there were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all emerging from the woods in a coordinated display that made my breath catch. They moved together, not randomly like fireflies usually do, but with purpose, their lights blinking in synchronization that seemed almost deliberate. I stood up from where I'd been sitting by the fire's remains, my neck prickling with that instinctive awareness that something wasn't right. The fireflies were gathering, forming a dense cloud that pulsed with light about 30 feet away, just past the tree line. They hovered there, waiting. Waiting for what? I should have gone into the tent, should have zipped myself in and ignored them. But there was something hypnotic about the way they moved, the way their lights seemed to create patterns in the darkness, I took a step forward, then another. The fireflies began to move. They drifted deeper into the forest, still synchronized, still pulsing together. I followed, telling myself I'd only go a little way, just far enough to see what they were doing. The forest floor was soft with decades of leaf litter, muffling my footsteps. Tree trunks emerged from the darkness like pillars in some vast cathedral, and overhead the canopy was so dense I couldn't see the sky. The fireflies stayed just ahead of me, always visible but never quite within reach. Their light reflected off the bark of the hemlocks, creating dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. I walked for what felt like 10 minutes, maybe 15, before I realized I'd left my flashlight back at camp. The only light came from the insects themselves. That's when I saw what they were spelling. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The human brain is wired to find patterns, to see faces in clouds and messages in static. But as I watched, the fireflies arranged themselves into clear, unmistakable letters suspended in the air. E. The letter hung there for perhaps 3 seconds, then dissolved as the fireflies scattered and reformed. L. My heart was hammering now. This wasn't possible. Fireflies don't spell words. They don't form letters in the air like some kind of living marquee. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. The fireflies pulsed brighter, their light casting everything in an eerie green-gold glow. J. My name. They were spelling my name. A. The final letter held for a long moment, the fireflies perfectly arranged, perfectly still. Then, as if released from some invisible command, they scattered into the darkness and were gone. I stood alone in the forest with no light and no sound except the ragged gasp of my own breathing. I ran, crashed through the underbrush without any sense of direction, just pure animal panic driving me forward. Branches whipped across my face and caught in my clothes. My foot found a root, and I went down hard. The wind knocked out of me. My palms scraped raw against stone. When I finally stopped, chest heaving, I had no idea where I was. The forest pressed in from all sides, identical in every direction. I turned in a slow circle, looking for any familiar landmark, any sign of the way back to camp. Nothing. I called out, my voice sounding small and pathetic in the vastness. "Hello? Anyone there?" The forest swallowed my words without echo. I forced myself to think rationally. I couldn't have gone that far. The camp was probably just a few hundred yards in one direction or another. I just needed to pick a path and follow it until I found something recognizable. I chose what I thought was east and started walking, moving slowly now, my hands held out in front of me to avoid walking face first into a tree. The darkness was absolute, the kind of dark that makes you question whether your eyes are even open. I could hear things moving around me, small scurrying sounds, the flutter of wings, the creak of branches settling. Normal night sounds that suddenly seemed threatening. After what might have been an hour, I saw light ahead. Not fireflies this time, but steady orange light like a campfire. Relief flooded through me. Another camper. Someone with a light and a radio and a way to call for help if needed. I stumbled toward it, emerging into a small clearing where a fire crackled merrily in a ring of stones. A tent stood nearby, identical to mine. Same brand, same color, same patched hole in the vestibule where I'd caught it on barbed wire 2 summers ago. My tent. But that was impossible. I'd left my fire as nothing but coals, and this one was burning bright and fresh, as if just built. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run again. The tent's front flap was unzipped, hanging open. I could see the dark interior, and something about that darkness seemed deeper than it should be, as if the tent's inside didn't follow the same rules as its outside. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is someone in there?" No response. I grabbed a stick from the woodpile and thrust it into the fire, creating a makeshift torch. The flames licked up the dry wood eagerly, casting dancing shadows across the clearing. I held it toward the tent opening. The light fell on something inside. Someone was lying in my sleeping bag. The shape was human, or mostly human. It had the right proportions, the right outline, But something about it was wrong. The way it lay was too still, too perfect, like a mannequin arranged by someone who had never seen a person actually sleep. "Hey," I said, my voice barely a whisper now. "Wake up." The shape didn't move. I took a step closer, holding the torch higher. The light fell on what should have been a face. It was a face. My face. The thing in my sleeping bag had my features, my hair, my 2-day stubble. Its eyes were closed, its chest rising and falling with steady breaths. It was me, sleeping peacefully in my own tent while I stood outside holding a burning stick and trying not to scream. The doppelganger's eyes opened. They were completely black. Not just the pupils, but the entire eye from edge to edge, like someone had filled the sockets with crude oil. It smiled at me with my own mouth, and the expression was all wrong. Too wide, too many teeth showing. It sat up in one fluid motion that no human spine could manage, bending at angles that made my stomach lurch. When it spoke, it used my voice. "You shouldn't have followed them, Elijah." I ran. This time I didn't care about direction or landmarks or finding my way back to anything. I just ran, the torch still clutched in my hand, its flames streaming behind me. The forest seemed to shift around me, trees appearing where none had been moments before, roots rising up to trip me. Behind me, I could hear it following. Not running, just walking at a steady pace, and somehow that was worse. It didn't need to run because it knew I couldn't escape. My foot caught on something and I went down again, the torch flying from my hand and landing in a drift of dry leaves. They caught immediately, flames spreading in a hungry circle. By that light I could see what had tripped me. A root, but not a normal root. This one was pale and smooth, more like bone than wood. And as I watched, it moved, curling around my ankle like fingers. I kicked free and scrambled backward, watching in horror as more of them emerged from the ground. They were everywhere, threading through the soil like veins, all of them the same bone-white color, all of them moving with horrible purpose. The fire was spreading now, climbing up the trunk of a dead hemlock and casting wild shadows across the clearing. In that light, I saw them. People, dozens of them, maybe more, standing between the trees in a perfect circle around me. They were all wrong, all of them, their proportions slightly off, their movements too jerky and mechanical. Some wore hiking clothes from decades past. Others were dressed in modern gear. A few wore nothing at all, their skin hanging loose like poorly fitted suits. They all had the same black eyes. "We've been waiting," they said in unison, a chorus of different voices all speaking the same words. "The lights called you. They call everyone eventually." I tried to stand, but the roots had my legs now, wrapping around my calves, my thighs, pulling me down into the soft earth. I could feel it giving way beneath me, feel myself sinking. "What are you?" I managed to gasp out. The circle of figures tilted their heads in perfect synchronization, the gesture disturbingly inhuman. "We are what the forest needs. We are what feeds it. We are what you will become." The ground was up to my waist now. I clawed at the earth, trying to find purchase, but my hands just sank into the soft loam. The fire had engulfed 3 trees now, the heat intense, but none of the figures moved. They just stood there watching with their oil-black eyes as I was pulled down. "The fireflies spell the names of those who are ready," the chorus continued. "Those who are ripe, those who are alone and far from help. They spell, and we harvest." My chest was below ground level now. I could feel things moving in the earth around me, brushing against my skin, cold and slick. I opened my mouth to scream and tasted dirt. That's when I heard the sound. A low rumble, growing louder, accompanied by the crash of something large moving through the underbrush. The figures turned their heads in unison, and for the first time, their expressions changed. They looked confused, uncertain. My Winnebago burst into the clearing, engine roaring, headlights blazing. It shouldn't have been able to drive through the forest. There was no road, no path wide enough, but it came anyway, smashing through saplings and underbrush like they weren't there. The RV's front bumper caught one of the figures and sent it flying. It hit a tree with a wet crunch and slid to the ground, its body folding in ways that made my eyes hurt to look at. Black liquid pooled beneath it, too thick to be blood. The other figures scattered, moving with that same unnatural jerking motion, disappearing into the trees. The roots around my legs went slack. I pulled myself out of the earth gasping, covered in dirt and scratches and blood from a dozen small cuts. The Winnebago's door swung open. The ranger stood there, the same woman from the permit station, but she looked different now. Older, somehow. Tired. She held a shotgun in one hand. "Get in," she said. "Now." I didn't need to be told twice. I hauled myself up the steps and into the RV's cab. She threw the vehicle into reverse, the engine screaming, and we crashed backward through the forest the way we'd come. "How did you—" I started to ask. "Shut up," she said, not unkindly. "Save your questions until we're clear." We drove for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the RV taking damage with every tree we sideswiped, every boulder we bounced over. Finally, we emerged onto a dirt road I recognized. The main Forest Service road. Civilization. The ranger pulled over and killed the engine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the tick of cooling metal, the whisper of wind through the pines. "They come every few years," she finally said, staring straight ahead through the windshield. "The fireflies. Nobody knows what they are or where they came from. Native tribes used to talk about lights in the forest that spelled names in the old tongue. Settlers reported the same thing. Every account describes the same pattern. The lights spell your name. You follow. You don't come back." "But you came for me," I said. "How did you know?" She reached into her jacket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. A permit application. Mine. My handwriting spelling out my name, my vehicle description, my planned route. "When someone comes alone," she said, "and they plan to camp in the deep woods, and they have that look in their eyes like they're running from something, I keep an eye out. I've saved 3 people over the years, lost dozens more. Those things in the forest," I said. "What were they?" "What's left," she replied. "The ones who followed the lights and didn't make it out. The forest changes them, uses them. I don't pretend to understand it. I just know that when the fireflies spell a name, that person becomes part of something very old and very hungry." She started the engine again. "I'll drive you to the main highway. From there, you're on your own. And if I were you, I'd keep driving. Don't stop in this county. Don't come back. The forest doesn't forget names once it's spelled them." We drove in silence to the highway. She pulled over at a gas station just as the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Normal colors, safe colors. I got out and started to thank her, but she was already pulling away, the damaged Winnebago rattling off down the road. I stood there in the parking lot as early morning traffic began to build, watching the sun climb higher. My hands were shaking. I was covered in dirt and blood and God knows what else. A woman getting gas gave me a worried look and pulled out her phone. I left, walked to the highway and stuck out my thumb. A trucker picked me up within an hour, asked no questions when he saw the state I was in. He dropped me at a bus station in Birmingham, and I bought a ticket to Atlanta. From there, I kept moving. Texas, Colorado, Oregon. That was 8 months ago. I tell myself I'm building a new life. I got a job in Portland, a studio apartment with a view of other studio apartments. I don't camp anymore. Don't even like being outside after dark. The city lights are comforting now, all that artificial glow keeping the real darkness at bay. But sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm trying to sleep, I see them. Just flashes at the corner of my vision. Green-gold pulses of light that disappear when I turn my head. They never last long, never form patterns. Not yet. Last week, I was walking home from work after dark. The street light at the corner of my block was out, creating a pool of shadow I had to pass through. As I walked through that darkness, I heard something, a rustling like dozens of small bodies moving together. I ran the last block to my building, fumbled with my keys, got inside, and locked the door. When I looked back through the window, I saw them. Fireflies, dozens of them, gathered on the sidewalk where I'd been standing, As I watched, they began to move, to arrange themselves. E. I closed the blinds and backed away from the window. They found me once. They can find me again. The ranger was wrong about one thing. The forest doesn't just spell names and wait for people to follow. It remembers. It pursues. And I'm starting to think there's nowhere far enough away, no city bright enough, no crowd large enough to hide in. Last night I found dirt in my bed, just a small pile, right where my feet had been. When I brushed it away, I saw what was underneath. Tiny white roots threading through the sheets, growing from the mattress. I burned the bed in the apartment complex's dumpster. A neighbor called the fire department. They asked questions I couldn't answer. I'm writing this now from a motel room 2 states over. I paid cash, used a fake name. It won't matter. The Fireflies don't need addresses or credit cards. They just need darkness and a name they've already spelled. I can see them through the gap in the curtains. Not many yet. Just 3 or 4, pulsing in the parking lot. Waiting. I could run again, buy another bus ticket, get on a plane, cross an ocean. But I'm tired. So tired of running. And part of me, a part that's been growing stronger these past few weeks, wants to know what happens when you stop fighting. What does it feel like when the roots take hold? When your eyes fill with that black oil and you join the circle of watchers in the forest? Is there pain? Or do you simply become part of something larger? Something that's been here long before humans gave it names like forest and wilderness. The fireflies are multiplying now. I can see their reflections in the motel window. Dozens of them, hundreds, all pulsing together. They're starting to form shapes, letters. I know what they're going to spell. They've already spelled it once. That's how this works, isn't it? The forest calls you by name, and once it knows who you are, you're already claimed. E. The motel room door won't hold them. Neither will the locks or the walls or any barrier I try to put between us. L. I can hear them now, not with my ears, but deeper in the part of my brain that still remembers what it was like before language, before civilization, when humans were just another kind of animal trying to survive in the darkness. They're singing. Or maybe it's the forest itself, using them as a voice. It's beautiful in a terrible way, like the sound of wind through empty houses or ice cracking on a frozen lake. J. My hands are shaking too much to write anymore. The pen keeps slipping from my fingers. There's dirt under my fingernails that wasn't there a moment ago. When I look in the mirror, my eyes are still brown, but there are dark threads beginning to web across the whites. A. The lights are coming in under the door now, through the window, through cracks in the walls I didn't know existed. They're everywhere, spelling my name over and over, an endless repetition of letters that float in the air like accusation. Someone's knocking on the door. 3 measured taps. I know if I open it, I'll see myself standing there. The thing that wears my face. The harvest that waited for me in the sleeping bag. It's been following me this whole time, waiting for me to get tired enough to stop running. The knocking comes again, patient, persistent. I'm walking toward the door. My hand is on the knob. I can feel the metal cold against my palm. All I have to do is turn it, let them in. Let the forest complete what it started, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to run one more time. Out the bathroom window, across the parking lot, into the street. I'll steal a car if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes to see one more sunrise, because the alternative is standing in a circle in the Sipsey wilderness with black eyes and loose skin, waiting for the next person whose name gets spelled in fireflies. Waiting to harvest. Waiting to feed. The knocking has stopped. When I look at the door, I see light seeping through the edges. Green gold pulses that make shadows dance across the motel's cheap carpet. I'm at the bathroom window now. It's small, but I can fit through. There's a drainage pipe I can use to climb down. The street is right there. I can see cars passing, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Normal people going to normal places. I can make it. I have to make it. The lights are in the bathroom now, seeping through the ventilation grate. They're forming letters on the ceiling. My name, upside down, reflected in the mirror. I'm through the window, hanging from the pipe. My shoes scrape against brick as I shimmy down. The parking lot is below, lit by sickly yellow streetlights. I can see the highway beyond it. Freedom. My feet hit pavement. I run. Behind me, I hear the motel room door crash open. Footsteps on the second-floor walkway, moving with that wrong rhythm, that mechanical gait. But I don't look back. Looking back is how they catch you. I reach the highway and don't stop. A car swerves around me, horn blaring. Another nearly clips me. I keep running. I'm in a drainage ditch now, water up to my ankles, trash floating past. The slope up the other side is steep, but I claw my way up, using roots and weeds as handholds. My shirt tears. My knee hits a rock and pain explodes through my leg. I keep moving. There's a truck stop ahead. Lights. People. The sound of diesel engines and talk radio. I stumble toward it, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my vision tunneling. The doors slide open automatically. Air conditioning hits me like a physical force. A clerk behind the counter looks up, takes one look at my condition, and reaches for the phone. "Don't," I gasp out. "Please. I just need—" What do I need? A phone? A ride? An explanation that won't get me committed? The clerk is young, maybe 20, with tired eyes that have seen enough weird shit on the night shift that one more crazy person doesn't faze him. "There's a bathroom in the back," he says. "Clean yourself up. I'll pretend I didn't see you come in." I want to thank him, but I'm already moving toward the back of the store, past aisles of chips and motor oil and energy drinks. The bathroom is small and grimy, the fluorescent light flickering. I lock the door and lean against it, my heart hammering. In the mirror, I barely recognize myself. My face is scratched and bruised, my clothes torn and filthy. But worse are my eyes. The threads of black are spreading, creating delicate patterns like frost on a window. I splash water on my face, trying to wash away the dirt, the blood, the spreading darkness. The water runs black down the drain. There's a sound from the ventilation grate above the toilet. A rustling, like dozens of small bodies moving together. I back toward the door, my hand fumbling for the lock. The grate falls to the floor with a clang. Fireflies pour into the bathroom, hundreds of them, thousands, filling the small space with pulsing green-gold light. They swarm around me, their tiny bodies brushing against my skin, my face, my eyes, and in their movements I can read the message clearly now. Not just my name, something more. You are ours. You have always been ours. Running only delays. Come home. The bathroom door opens, though I know I locked it. The thing with my face stands in the doorway. Behind it, I can see the truck stop has changed. The fluorescent lights have dimmed to nothing. The clerk is gone. The aisles stretch into infinite darkness. "It's time," my doppelganger says in my voice. "The forest is waiting." I try to scream, but my mouth fills with fireflies. They taste like earth and decay and something older than names. My legs give out and I fall to the bathroom floor, the cold tiles pressing against my cheek. I can feel the roots now, threading through the grout, emerging from the pipes, wrapping around my wrists, my ankles, my throat. The last thing I see before the darkness takes me is the swarm of fireflies, spelling one final message on the bathroom ceiling. "Welcome home, Elijah." Then nothing. Nothing, except the green-gold pulse of lights in the darkness and the knowledge that somewhere in the Sipsey wilderness, a circle of figures has grown by one. I am standing among them now, I think. Though thinking is difficult, memory is difficult. I know I had a name once, but it's slipping away like water through my fingers. The forest is patient. The forest is hungry. And when the fireflies spell another name in the darkness, I will be there, waiting to harvest, waiting to bring them home. This is how it ends. This is how it always ends. With green-gold lights dancing through the trees and names spelled in the darkness and the forest growing strong on the souls of those who followed where they shouldn't have. If you see fireflies moving together, synchronized, purposeful, don't follow them. And if they spell your name, run. Run, and don't stop running. Though I wonder now if it matters. If the forest has spoken your name, Are you already lost? Already claimed? Already part of the harvest that waits in the dark places where the light can't reach? I don't have answers anymore. I don't have anything except the need to stand in this circle and wait for the next name to be spelled and the next harvest to begin. The fireflies are gathering again. They're forming letters. A name I don't recognize but will soon know intimately. And I am waiting. We are all waiting. The forest never stops being hungry. Story 4. I'm Lila, 34. I heard my father's voice at the Ozark National Forest in Arkansas, though he's been gone 10 years. The RV's engine made a sound like my father clearing his throat as we rolled past the ranger station at dusk. I tried not to notice. Tommy had his hand on my knee, wedding ring cool against my skin, and he was humming something tuneless while our daughter Kaylee pressed her nose to the window in the back seat. "Look at all the trees, Mom," she said, her breath fogging the glass. I looked. Pine and oak stretched in every direction, thick enough to swallow the fading light. The Ozark National Forest had seemed like a good idea 3 weeks ago when Tommy suggested we needed to reconnect as a family. His work had consumed him for months. My teaching job left me wrung out by June, and Kaylee had spent the school year glued to her tablet. A week off-grid, he'd said. Just us and nature. The campground host was a thin woman named Carol who smelled like wood smoke and gave us a map with shaky hands. "You're in Site 14, she said, not meeting my eyes. "Only one out there this time of year." "Slow season?" Tommy asked. "Something like that." She glanced past us toward the tree line. "Stay on the marked trails. And if you hear anything strange at night, it's just the wildlife." The way she said wildlife made my stomach clench. We drove another mile down a dirt road that wound deeper into the forest. The RV jostled over ruts, and Kaylee complained about her stomach. I told her we were almost there, even though I had no idea how much farther it was. The trees grew closer together, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out what little daylight remained. Site 14 sat in a clearing barely large enough for the RV. A fire ring made of blackened stones marked the center, and a weathered picnic table tilted to one side. The forest pressed in from all sides, a wall of green and shadow. "It's perfect," Tommy said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. I wanted to argue, but Kaylee had already scrambled out, running circles around the clearing with her arms spread wide. She was 9, all knees and elbows and unfiltered joy. I envied her that. We set up camp as the sun disappeared completely. Tommy connected the RV to the generator, and warm light spilled from our windows, pushing back the dark. I made sandwiches while he built a fire, and Kaylee collected pine cones, arranging them in a circle around the picnic table. "Why are you doing that?" I asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. It feels right." Kids say things like that. I didn't think much of it then. The fire caught, and we sat around it eating turkey and cheese on white bread. The woods had gone completely silent. No crickets, no birds, no rustling in the underbrush. Just the crackle of burning wood and our own quiet chewing. "It's peaceful," Tommy said, leaning back in his camping chair. "When's the last time we had this kind of quiet?" Never, I thought. We'd never had quiet like this. Quiet was supposed to have ambient noise. The hum of a refrigerator, distant traffic, a neighbor's dog. This wasn't quiet. This was absence. "I'm tired," Kaylee announced, standing up and brushing crumbs from her lap. "Can I go to bed?" I walked her to the RV, tucking her into the fold-out bunk and kissing her forehead. She smelled like campfire and strawberry shampoo. "Love you, baby." "Love you too, Mom." She rolled over, already half asleep. When I came back outside, Tommy had pulled 2 beers from the cooler. He handed me one, and we sat in silence, watching the flames. The fire cast strange shadows on the trees, making them seem to lean closer. "This was a good idea," I said, trying to convince myself. "Yeah." He took a long drink. "We needed this." That's when I heard it. Faint, almost lost in the crackle of the fire, but unmistakable. Lila bird. My father's nickname for me, the one only he had ever used. I stood up so fast my chair tipped backward. "Did you hear that?" Tommy looked up at me, confused. "Hear what?" "Someone said my name." He listened, head cocked. I don't hear anything. It came from the woods. I pointed toward the tree line, where the darkness was so thick it looked solid. Over there. Tommy stood, putting himself between me and the forest. It's probably just an animal, or the wind. There was no wind. The air was perfectly still. I heard it, Tommy. Okay. He set his beer down, came to me, put his hands on my shoulders. You're tired. It's been a long drive. Let's get some sleep and everything will seem less creepy in the morning. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think exhaustion was playing tricks on my mind. But I knew my father's voice. I'd heard it every day for the first 24 years of my life, right up until the heart attack took him in his sleep. I'd heard it at his funeral, a recording someone played of him laughing at my wedding. I'd heard it in my dreams for years afterward, and I just heard it in the Ozark National Forest, calling me by a name no one else knew. We went to bed. Tommy fell asleep immediately, his breathing deep and even. I lay awake, staring at the RV's ceiling, listening to the nothing outside. Around midnight, I heard Kaylee stir in her bunk, whimpering softly. I climbed down and checked on her. She was still asleep, but her eyes moved rapidly beneath her lids and she'd kicked off her blanket. I pulled it back over her and stroked her hair. Shh, baby. Just dreams. He's calling you, she mumbled, not waking up. Don't go. My hand froze. What did you say? But she'd already gone still again, breathing softly. I didn't sleep that night. Morning came with mist and the smell of damp earth. I made coffee on the RV's small stove while Tommy and Kaylee slept, then sat outside at the picnic table, warming my hands on the mug. The forest looked different in daylight, less menacing, more ordinary. Birds sang somewhere in the canopy. A squirrel chattered from a nearby oak. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. Tommy emerged around 8, stretching and yawning. Morning, babe. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. He kissed the top of my head. Still freaked out? A little. Want to go on a hike? Burn off some anxiety? I did, actually. Movement seemed better than sitting still, waiting for something to happen. We woke Kaylee and ate breakfast. Instant oatmeal that tasted like cardboard, then consulted the map Carol had given us. A trail called the White Rock Loop started about a quarter-mile from our site and wound through the forest for 3 miles, ending at a limestone outcropping with views of the valley below. Easy hike, Tommy said. Perfect for all skill levels. We set out around 9:30, Kaylee walking between us, holding both our hands. The trail was well marked at first, blue blazes painted on tree trunks every 50 feet. The forest was beautiful in daylight. Shafts of sun breaking through the canopy, ferns carpeting the ground, the occasional flash of a bird's wing. We walked for maybe 20 minutes before I noticed the blazes were getting farther apart. Are we still on the trail? I asked. Tommy checked the map. Should be. The loop is pretty straightforward. But another 10 minutes passed without seeing a single blaze. The trail itself had become less defined, barely a depression in the leaf litter. I was about to suggest we turn back when Kaylee stopped walking. Do you smell that? She asked. I did. Something sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. Probably a dead animal, Tommy said, but he sounded uncertain. The smell got stronger as we continued. Soon it was overwhelming. A thick, cloying stench that made my eyes water. Kaylee pulled her shirt up over her nose and I fought the urge to gag. That's when we found the deer. It lay in a small clearing just off the trail, its body twisted at an impossible angle. But it wasn't the dead deer that made me stop breathing. It was the fact that it had been arranged. Its legs were splayed in perfect symmetry, its head bent backward so its dead eyes stared at the sky, and around it, someone had drawn a circle in the dirt. What the fuck? Tommy whispered. Language, I said automatically, covering Kaylee's ears. But she pulled away, taking a step closer to the deer. Someone's playing a game. We're leaving, I said, grabbing her hand. Now. We turned back the way we'd come, walking faster now, not quite running. But within minutes I realized something was wrong. The forest looked different. The trees were too close together, the undergrowth too thick. I didn't recognize anything. "Tommy, where's the trail?" He spun in a slow circle, map in hand. "It should be right here. We just came this way." But there was no trail, just trees and ferns and that horrible smell that seemed to follow us. "Maybe we got turned around," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Let's head back toward the sun. That should get us going the right direction." We walked for an hour. The sun moved, but we never seemed to get any closer to our campsite. Kaylee started to cry, quietly at first, then louder. I carried her on my back, her thin arms wrapped around my neck, her tears hot against my skin. "I want to go home," she sobbed. "We will, baby. I promise." But I had no idea how to keep that promise. Around noon, we found the deer again. It was impossible. We'd been walking in a straight line, away from where we'd found it the first time. But there it was, in the same clearing, in the same position, surrounded by the same circle in the dirt. Tommy's face had gone pale. "This doesn't make sense. Lila bird." I heard it clearly this time, and so did Tommy. I saw it in the way his whole body went rigid, the way his eyes darted toward the tree line. "Who's there?" he shouted. The forest absorbed his words, giving nothing back. "Lila bird, come here." It was coming from deeper in the woods, past the dead deer, where the trees grew so thick I couldn't see more than a few feet in. "That's not possible," I said, my voice shaking. "He's dead." "Who's dead?" Tommy grabbed my arm. "Lila, who is that?" "My father." Kaylee had gone completely silent, staring into the dark between the trees. "Your father's been dead for a decade," Tommy said. "That's not him." "I know." My throat felt tight. I know it's not him, but part of me, some small desperate part, wanted it to be. Wanted to believe that somehow, impossibly, my father had found his way back. "Come on, Lila bird, I've missed you." "Don't go," Kaylee whispered. "Mom, please don't go." I had no intention of going. Whatever was out there wearing my father's voice, it wasn't human. It wasn't right. We turned and ran. The forest seemed to fight us. Branches caught at our clothes, roots grabbed at our feet. Kaylee's weight on my back made me stumble, and Tommy caught me before I fell. We kept going, pushing through underbrush that shouldn't have been there, past trees that seemed to shift position when I wasn't looking directly at them. And all the while, that voice followed us. "Lila bird, where are you going? Don't you want to see your old dad?" We ran until my lungs burned and my legs went numb. Finally, I had to stop. I set Kaylee down, doubled over, gasping for air. Tommy leaned against a tree, his face red and slick with sweat. "We need to find the road," he panted. "Any road. We can follow it back to the ranger station." "Which way is the road?" He looked around, and I saw the moment he realized we were completely lost. "I don't know." The sun was starting to sink. We had maybe 3 hours of daylight left. "We should stay put," I said. "It's basic survival. Stay where you are, wait for rescue. No one knows we're out here." Tommy's voice was rising. "We didn't tell anyone exactly where we were going, and that woman at the ranger station—" He stopped. "What about her?" "She knew. She knew something was wrong with this place." Kaylee tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, what's that?" She was pointing at a tree about 20 feet away. Carved into the bark, still oozing sap, were letters. "Lila. My name." "We need to move," Tommy said. "Right now." We started walking again, faster now, with no clear direction. The forest had become a maze, every turn leading to more trees, more shadows, more silence. And then Kaylee screamed. She was pointing at something on the ground. A backpack. A small, pink backpack with a unicorn patch on the front. Her backpack. "That's impossible," Tommy said. "Your backpack is in the RV." But Kaylee was already unzipping it. Inside were her things. Her stuffed rabbit, her notebook, her pack of colored pencils, and something else. A Polaroid photograph. The picture showed our campsite, Site 14. But there were people in it. A woman who looked like me, a man who looked like Tommy, and a little girl who looked like Kaylee. They were sitting around the fire smiling. But their smiles were wrong, stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. Tommy snatched the photo from Kaylee's hand and threw it into the trees. "We're leaving. Now! We're leaving right now!" He picked up Kaylee and started running. I followed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The forest blurred around us and I lost all sense of direction. We could have been running in circles or running straight off the edge of the world. Then I saw light ahead. Orange, flickering light. "Tommy, wait." But he'd already reached it. We'd found our campsite. The RV sat exactly where we'd left it, the fire ring still smoking from this morning's breakfast. Everything looked normal, except for the figure standing by the fire. He had his back to us, but I knew that posture, the slight stoop of his shoulders, the way he held his hands behind his back. My father had stood exactly like that when he was thinking. "Dad?" The word came out before I could stop it. The figure turned. It had my father's face, his gray eyes, his crooked smile, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident. But the proportions were wrong. The eyes were too far apart, the smile too wide, the skin too smooth, like a mask. "There you are, Lila Bird," it said in my father's voice. "I've been waiting." Tommy pushed Kaylee behind him. "Stay away from us." The thing that looked like my father cocked its head, a movement no human neck could make. "But I came all this way to see my daughter. Don't you want to catch up?" "You're not my father." "Aren't I?" It took a step closer, and I saw that its feet didn't quite touch the ground. "I remember teaching you to ride a bike. I remember your first day of school. I remember holding you when your goldfish died. You named it Bubbles. Those were real memories. My memories." "How? I've been here a long time, Lila Bird. In the quiet places. And I hear things. Thoughts. Wishes. Regrets." Another step closer. "You wanted to see me again. You wished for it. So here I am. You're not real. Does it matter?" The thing smiled wider. "I could be. I could stay. We could all stay. One big happy family." That's when I noticed the other figures emerging from the trees. They looked like people, but wrong in the same way. Too smooth, too perfect, their movements just slightly off. And they were coming from all directions, surrounding us. Tommy grabbed my hand. "Get in the RV." We ran. I scooped up Kaylee, and Tommy yanked the RV door open. We piled inside, and he slammed it shut, locking it. Through the window, I could see the figures closing in. A dozen of them now, maybe more. They stood in a circle around the RV, not moving, just watching. The thing with my father's face stepped up to the window and pressed its hand against the glass. Its fingers were too long. "You can't leave, Lila Bird. The forest won't let you." Tommy was already in the driver's seat, turning the key. The engine coughed but didn't catch. He tried again. Nothing. Come on. The third time it roared to life. He threw it into gear and hit the gas. The RV lurched forward and the figures scattered like leaves. We crashed through the underbrush, branches scraping along the sides, the RV rocking violently over the uneven ground. "Where's the road?" I screamed. "I don't know. I'm just driving." We burst through a line of trees and suddenly we were on pavement, the dirt road that led back to the ranger station. Tommy gunned it, the RV swaying dangerously as we took the curves too fast. I looked back through the rear window. The forest was following us. Trees moved, sliding across the ground like chess pieces, trying to cut us off. And among them, running faster than anything human could run, was the thing with my father's face. "Faster!" "I'm going as fast as I can." Kaylee was sobbing in my arms, her face buried in my shoulder. I held her tight and prayed to anything that would listen. The ranger station appeared ahead, a small wooden building with a single light on inside. Tommy didn't slow down. We blew past it, past the empty parking lot, past the sign that said, "Thank you for visiting Ozark National Forest." The trees stopped at the forest's edge. The thing that looked like my father stood at the boundary, watching us go. As we pulled onto the highway, I saw it raise one hand in a wave. "Goodbye, Lila Bird," I heard, even though we were too far away for any voice to reach us. "I'll be here when you want to visit again." We drove for 3 hours straight, putting as much distance between us and that place as possible. Tommy white-knuckled the steering wheel, and I held Kaylee, who had finally cried herself to sleep. We didn't talk about what happened. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I hear my father's voice calling from somewhere far away, and sometimes I find Kaylee standing at her window, staring into our backyard, humming a song my father used to sing. The doctors say she's fine. No trauma, no lasting effects, just a little girl who had a scary experience while camping. They don't see what I see. The way her eyes sometimes go unfocused, looking at something that isn't there. The way she draws pictures of trees and smiling figures with two wide mouths. The way she asks every few weeks when we can go camping again. Tommy threw away everything from that trip. The tent, the camping chairs, even our wedding rings that we'd worn in those woods. He thought if we got rid of the physical reminders we could forget. But I still have the map. Carol's shaky-handed map with the hand-drawn trails and the X marking site 14. I keep it in my desk drawer, and sometimes I take it out and stare at it, trying to understand what we stumbled into. Last week, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Static on the line. And then, barely audible beneath the white noise, Lila Bird. I hung up. I blocked the number. I told myself it was a wrong number, a prank, a glitch. But I know better. The Ozark National Forest is still there, waiting. Site 14 is still there, empty and quiet. And in the spaces between the trees, in the quiet places where thoughts echo and wishes take form, something is still calling my name. I haven't gone back. I won't go back. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed next to Tommy, listening to him breathe, I wonder if we ever really left at all. If maybe we're still out there in those woods, running in circles, following blazes that lead nowhere, while something else lives our lives for us. Kaylee started sleepwalking last month. I find her in the living room most nights, standing perfectly still, staring at the wall. When I guide her back to bed, she murmurs things in her sleep. Names I don't recognize. Places that don't exist. And once, just once, she opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression that wasn't quite right. Her smile was a little too wide. "Don't worry, Mom," she said in a voice that might have been hers. "He says we can visit any time." Then she closed her eyes and went back to sleep, and she was just my daughter again. I tell myself she was dreaming. That's what the therapist says when I mention it. Children have vivid imaginations. They process trauma in strange ways. But I saw what I saw in those woods. I heard what I heard. And late at night, when the house creaks and settles, when the shadows in the corners seem too deep, I hear my father's voice one more time. "I'll be waiting, Lila Bird. We'll all be waiting. I keep the lights on now. All of them. And I never, ever let the quiet get too quiet. Because I know what lives in the quiet now. I know what's listening. And I know that someday, despite everything, part of me will want to go back. To see if my father is really there. To know if love can exist beyond death, even in a twisted wrong form. That's the part that scares me most. Not the forest. Not the thing that wears familiar faces. But the part of me that still wants to hear my father call me Lila Bird one more time, even knowing what it costs. The forest is patient. It can wait. And so can I. For now. Story. 5. My name is Owen. I'm 34. The shadows at the Tongass National Forest pointed the wrong way. I noticed it on our second morning, standing outside the RV with my coffee steaming in the October cold. The sun had just cracked the horizon behind me, casting long rays through the Sitka spruce and western hemlock that crowded our campsite like silent witnesses. But my shadow, it stretched forward, toward the sunrise instead of away from it. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, convinced it was some trick of the Alaska light, the way it plays different up here in the Panhandle. When I looked again, everything seemed normal. The shadow fell where it should. I laughed at myself, took another sip of coffee, and went back inside the RV where my wife Diane was still sleeping. We'd driven the RV up from Seattle, taking the ferry from Bellingham through the Inside Passage, a bucket list trip we'd been planning for 3 years. Diane taught 3rd grade, and I worked IT for a hospital system. Jobs that ground you down slowly, predictably. We needed this. Needed to disappear into the largest national forest in the United States. 17 million acres of wilderness where you could lose yourself and never be found. That last part should have worried me more than it did. The campsite was called Whispering Creek, a primitive spot about 40 miles south of Juneau, accessible only by a logging road that hadn't seen maintenance in years. The ranger who'd sold us the permit had been strange about it. An old Tlingit woman with silver braids and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. Whispering Creek, she'd said slowly, like she was tasting something bitter. You sure about that one? It's remote, I'd replied. That's what we want. Remote, she'd nodded. Yes, very remote. Then she'd written something in Tlingit on the back of our permit before handing it to me. When I'd asked what it said, she just smiled. Old Blessing, for travelers. Diane had loved that. She was into spiritual stuff. Crystals, sage bundles, the whole package. She'd insisted we bring offerings for the forest spirits, little bundles of tobacco and cornmeal that she'd leave at the base of particularly old trees. I'd rolled my eyes but let her do it. Whatever made her happy. Our RV was a 28-foot Class C motorhome. Not new, but reliable. We'd packed it with enough supplies for 2 weeks. Food, water, camping gear, my photography equipment. Diane had also brought her journals, sketchbooks, watercolors. She wanted to document the trip, create art from it. I just wanted to sleep without the sound of traffic and eat meals without checking my phone every 5 minutes. The first day had been perfect. We'd hiked a narrow trail that wound through old-growth forest, where the trees were so massive and ancient they seemed to predate human consciousness itself. Some of the Sitka spruce were over 700 years old, their trunks wider than our RV. The forest floor was a thick carpet of moss that muffled every sound, making the world feel wrapped in green velvet. Diane had sketched while I photographed, and we'd barely spoken. Didn't need to. The silence was a conversation in itself. But that second morning, after I'd seen my shadow pointing the wrong way, things started to feel different. Diane woke up around 8, her dark hair mussed, face creased from the pillow. "Morning," she mumbled, heading straight for the coffee I'd brewed. "Sleep okay?" "Weird dreams." She poured herself a cup, added too much sugar like always. "I dreamed we were walking through the forest, but all the trees were upside down. Their roots were in the air, and we were walking on the canopy. I felt something cold touch the base of my spine. That's vivid. I've been having them every night since we got here, different each time but always wrong somehow. Last night I dreamed you were standing outside the RV, but you were transparent. I could see right through you to the forest behind you. Probably just adjusting to being away from the city," I said, not believing it. "Our brains are used to constant stimulation. Out here, they make up weird stuff to compensate." She looked at me over the rim of her mug. "Maybe." We spent the morning exploring closer to camp. There was a creek about 100 yards from where we'd parked, the one that gave the campsite its name, presumably. But when we reached it, we both stopped. The water was running uphill. Not quickly, not obviously, but definitely uphill. I could see it with my own eyes, could see the way it flowed against the natural gradient of the land, moving from lower ground to higher. Diane crouched down, put her hand in the water. "It's warm," she said. "Owen, this water is warm, like bath water." I knelt beside her, felt it myself. She was right. The creek was warm, almost hot, and it smelled faintly of copper. I pulled my hand back. "There must be a hot spring nearby," I said. "Thermal activity. That would explain the temperature and the mineral smell." "And the water running uphill?" I didn't have an answer for that. "Optical illusion? The way the land slopes can trick the eye." But even as I said it, I dropped a leaf into the water and watched it float upstream, against gravity, against sense. Diane watched it too. Her face pale. "I don't like this," she whispered. "It's just weird geology," I said, trying to sound confident. "Alaska is full of weird geology." We went back to the RV for lunch, neither of us mentioning what we'd seen. But I noticed Diane had stopped talking about her art project. She ate her sandwich in silence, staring out the window at the forest. That afternoon, I decided to check the RV's systems. We were running on battery power since there were no hookups out here, and I wanted to make sure the solar panels were charging properly. I climbed up on the roof, checked the connections, cleaned some debris off the panels. Everything looked fine. But when I glanced toward the forest, I saw them. Shadows. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds between the trees, but they weren't attached to anything. They moved independently, sliding across the moss-covered ground like oil slicks, pooling in the hollows between roots, climbing up tree trunks. And every single one of them pointed toward our RV, toward me, regardless of where the sun was. I scrambled down so fast I almost fell, bruising my shin on the ladder. Diane came running out. "What happened?" "Nothing. I slipped. I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. My hands were shaking as I went back inside. I made an excuse about being tired and lay down in the back bedroom, but I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those shadows, the way they'd oriented toward me like compass needles toward magnetic north. When I finally came out around dinner time, Diane had made pasta on the propane stove. We ate in near silence. The sun was setting, turning the sky a deep bruised purple. Through the windows the forest was darkening, but not evenly. Patches of deep shadow appeared in places that should have still been lit, while other areas seemed to glow with their own faint luminescence. "I want to leave tomorrow," Diane said suddenly. "What? We just got here 2 days ago." "I know, but I don't like this place, Owen. Something's wrong with it. The dreams, the water, the way the light works, it's all wrong." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was being paranoid, that we'd driven all this way and paid for the permit and we should at least stay a week. But looking at her face, seeing the genuine fear there, I couldn't do it. "Okay," I said. "We'll leave in the morning. First light." The relief on her face was immediate. "Thank you." We went to bed early, both of us exhausted despite having done almost nothing all day. I fell asleep quickly but woke sometime in the deep night to a sound I couldn't identify. A rhythmic creaking, like branches in wind, but there was no wind. The RV was perfectly still. I got up, trying not to wake Diane, and went to the front cabin. Looked out the windshield. The trees were swaying, all of them in perfect synchronization, bending and straightening in a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. But again, no wind. The air was dead calm. I could see it in the way the ferns and undergrowth remained motionless while the massive trees above swayed and creaked. Then I saw the figure. It stood about 30 yards from the RV at the edge of the clearing. Human-shaped but wrong in proportions. Too tall, too thin, limbs that bent at angles that didn't match human joints. It was facing away from me, toward the deeper forest, but even from behind I could tell it wasn't human. The skin, if that's what it was, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it appear as a human-shaped hole in reality. As I watched, it turned its head, kept turning it, rotating a full 180 degrees without moving its body until it was looking directly at the RV, directly at me. It had no face. Where features should have been, there was only smooth blankness, like an unfinished mannequin. But I could feel it seeing me anyway, feel its attention like a weight pressing against my chest. Then it raised one arm and beckoned. I stumbled backward, fell against the driver's seat, and the noise woke Diane. She came out rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong?" I pointed at the windshield, but when I looked again, the figure was gone. The trees had stopped swaying. Everything was still and normal and wrong. Nothing. Bad dream. Sorry. But we both knew I was lying. I could see it in her eyes. She'd seen something too, or felt it. The wrongness that had soaked into this place like water into wood. "We're leaving now," she said. "Right now. I don't care that it's dark. Diane, we can't navigate that logging road at night. It's barely a road in daylight. We'll get stuck, or worse. Then we lock the doors and wait. But the second there's light, we go." I agreed. We locked every door, every window, pulled all the curtains closed. Diane wedged a chair against the main door, even though it wouldn't do any good. It opened outward. We sat together on the couch, not sleeping, listening to the sounds of the forest. Around 3 in the morning, we heard footsteps. They circled the RV, slow and deliberate, not trying to be quiet, not trying to hide, just walking around us in a steady circuit, around and around and around. I counted the steps, 57 to complete one circuit, then it would start again. 57 steps. Diane gripped my hand so tight I lost feeling in my fingers. "Don't look," I whispered. "Don't open the curtains." But I wanted to. God help me. I wanted to see what was out there. The curiosity was almost overwhelming, like an itch I couldn't scratch. My hand actually reached for the curtain before Diane yanked it back. "No," she hissed. "That's what it wants." She was right. I could feel it wanting me to look, feel the pull of it like a fish hook in my brain. I clenched my fists, dug my nails into my palms until it hurt, used the pain to focus on something else. The footsteps continued. 57 steps, around and around. Then they stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. In that silence, we could hear our own breathing, our own heartbeats, and underneath it all, a faint humming. It seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating up through the RV's frame, making the dishes in the cupboard clink softly against each other. "Owen," Diane whispered. The shadows. I'd been trying not to look at them, but now I couldn't help it. Our shadows cast by the small LED light we'd left on were pointing the wrong way. They stretched away from the light source, toward it rather than away from it, and they were too dark, too solid, like they'd been cut from black construction paper and pasted to the floor. As we watched, they began to move. Not with us, but independently. My shadow raised its arm. Diane's shadow turned its head. They moved with a liquid grace that human bodies don't possess, flowing rather than stepping. "This isn't real," Diane said, but her voice shook. "This can't be real." My shadow pointed at me. Then it pointed toward the door. "It wants us to go outside," I said. "We're not going outside." But even as she said it, I felt the pull again. The overwhelming urge to open the door, to step out into the forest, to see what was waiting. My hand moved toward the door handle without my permission, my body acting on its own. Diane grabbed my arm. "Owen, no!" The sound of her voice snapped something in me. I jerked my hand back, stumbled away from the door. My shadow on the floor seemed to convulse, writhing like it was in pain. Then the knocking started. Not on the door, on every surface. The walls, the roof, the floor, the windows. A rhythmic knocking, keeping time with that underground hum. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Like something trying to find a weak point, testing the RV's shell for a way in. We huddled together on the couch, and I prayed for sunrise. Prayed harder than I'd prayed for anything in my life. The knocking continued until the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky. Then it stopped. Just like that, mid-rhythm, as if someone had flipped a switch. The humming ceased. Our shadows returned to normal. The forest outside went quiet. "Go," Diane said. "Go now." I didn't argue. I went to the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. I tried again. Same result. "No, no, no, no," I muttered, pumping the gas, turning the key. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. It was fine yesterday. Everything was fine." I popped the hood, went outside even though every instinct screamed at me not to. The forest was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. Like every living thing had fled. I lifted the hood and immediately saw the problem. The battery cables had been disconnected. Not loosened, not corroded, completely removed and laid carefully on top of the engine block. And on the battery itself, written in what looked like ash or soot, was a symbol I didn't recognize. A circle with lines radiating from it like a dark sun. My hands shook as I reconnected the cables. Behind me, I heard Diane gasp. I turned. She was standing in the RV's doorway, pointing at the trees. "Owen, look at the trees." Every tree in the clearing had the same symbol carved into its bark. Dozens of them, all at exactly the same height, forming a perfect circle around our campsite. and they were fresh, sap still weeping from the cuts. "Get in," I said. "Get in the RV right now." We both scrambled inside. I turned the key and this time the engine caught, roaring to life. I'd never heard a more beautiful sound. I threw it in drive and hit the gas, not caring about the rough terrain, just wanting to get out of that clearing. The logging road was worse than I remembered. Potholes that could swallow a tire, fallen branches, sections where the forest had tried to reclaim the path. But I pushed through, going too fast, branches scraping the RV's sides like fingernails. "Owen, slow down." "No, we're not slowing down until we're out of this forest." We'd gone maybe 2 miles when I realized the road looked wrong. I'd paid careful attention on the way in, making mental notes of landmarks in case we needed to find our way out. But nothing looked familiar. The trees were different. The curves were different. This wasn't the road we'd come in on. "This is wrong," I said. "This isn't right." "What do you mean?" "The road. This isn't the same road." "There's only one road, Owen. It has to be the same road." But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. The road we'd driven in on had been rough but relatively straight. This one curved and twisted like a snake, leading us deeper into the forest instead of out. I stopped the RV, threw it in reverse. But when I looked in the mirrors, the road behind us had changed, too. It curved away into shadows, looking nothing like the path we'd just driven. "What's happening?" Diane's voice had gone high and thin with panic. "I don't know." I tried going forward. The road continued to change, sprouting new curves, new branches. Every time I thought I saw the way out, it would shift, leading us in circles. After an hour of this, we were completely lost. The fuel gauge was dropping, and I had no idea where we were. The GPS showed nothing but green. No roads, no trails, just forest for miles in every direction. "We have to stop," Diane said. "We're just wasting gas." She was right. I pulled over into a wider spot and killed the engine. For a long moment, we just sat there in silence. "We're going to die out here," Diane whispered. "No, we're not. We have supplies. We have water. Someone will come looking for us eventually." "Who?" "We told everyone we wanted to be off-grid. We told them not to expect contact for 2 weeks." She was right about that, too. In our eagerness to disconnect, we'd made ourselves impossible to find. I forced myself to think practically. Okay, we conserve fuel, we ration food and water, we wait for someone to come. And if no one comes, they will. The ranger knows we're out here. She'll check on us. But even as I said it, I thought of the old woman's strange smile, the Tlingit words written on our permit. Had she known? Had she sent us here on purpose? We spent the rest of that day in the RV, not daring to go outside. I tried the radio, got nothing but static. The CB radio was the same. My phone had no signal. Hadn't had signal since we'd entered the forest. As evening approached, Diane made us dinner with our dwindling supplies. We ate in silence, watching the shadows gather outside. And this time, I couldn't deny what I was seeing. The shadows were all wrong. They pointed toward the RV from every direction, like spokes toward a hub, regardless of where the setting sun was. "It's happening again," Diane said. "I know." "What does it want?" "I don't know." But I was lying. I did know, in that deep animal part of my brain that still remembers what it's like to be prey. It wanted us. Not to kill. That would be too simple. It wanted us to become part of this place, part of the wrongness, until we were just another set of shadows pointing the wrong way. When full dark came, the knocking started again. But this time it was more insistent, more demanding. The RV rocked with the force of it. "Owen!" Diane grabbed my arm. "The door." I looked. The door handle was turning. Slowly, deliberately, though nothing visible touched it. I lunged forward, grabbed the handle, held it in place. The force pulling against me was immense, far stronger than any human. My arms shook with the effort of keeping it closed. "The chair!" I gasped. "Wedge the chair." Diane moved, but not toward the chair. She was staring at the window, her face white. "Diane! The chair!" "Owen, look at the window." I didn't want to. Couldn't spare the strength to turn my head. But then I heard it. Breathing. Right outside the door. slow, wet breathing that didn't sound like it came from lungs. The force on the door handle suddenly released. I stumbled backward, and in that moment, I made the mistake of looking at the window. A face pressed against the glass. My face. Exactly my face, down to the small scar above my left eyebrow. But the expression was wrong. Too wide a smile, too much teeth, eyes that reflected the interior light like an animal's. "Let me in, Diane," it said in my voice. "It's cold out here. Let me in," Diane screamed. The sound seemed to shatter something, and the face vanished, leaving only darkness. "It's not me," I said. "Diane, that's not me. I'm right here." But she was backing away, looking between me and the window, unable to tell which was real. "Diane, it's me. It's Owen. Look at me. How do I know?" Tears streamed down her face. "How do I know you're you?" I didn't have an answer. What could I say that the thing outside couldn't also say? What proof could I offer? Then I remembered. The scar on your hip. You got it when you were 9. Fell off your bike onto a broken bottle. You never told anyone because you thought you'd get in trouble for riding in the vacant lot. Only I know about it. She hesitated, then slowly pulled up her shirt, checked the scar. When she looked at me again, the terror had lessened slightly. Okay, it's you. But the relief was short-lived, because now we could hear voices outside. Multiple voices, all familiar. My mother, who'd died 2 years ago. Diane's father, gone for 5. Friends, colleagues, people from our past, all calling to us, asking us to come out, to join them. "Don't listen," I said. "Whatever you hear, don't listen." We spent that night huddled together, hands over our ears, trying to block out the voices of the dead, but they seeped in anyway, worming into our minds. My mother told me she was disappointed. Diane's father said she'd always been his least favorite daughter. The voices knew exactly what to say to hurt us, knew our deepest fears and shames. Sometime before dawn, Diane started laughing. Not a healthy laugh, a broken one, edged with hysteria. "What's funny?" I asked. "We're already dead, aren't we? We died on the road. This is hell. This is what hell is." "No, we're alive. We're still alive." "How do you know? Maybe that road we drove on was the River Styx. Maybe that ranger was Karen. Maybe this is what comes after." I grabbed her shoulders, forced her to look at me. "We're alive. You can feel pain. I'll prove it." I pinched her arm hard. She yelped, jerked away. "What the hell, Owen?" "See? Pain. Hell wouldn't give you pain you could prove. It would just be doubt, forever. But you felt that. You're real. I'm real. This is real." She rubbed her arm, but some clarity had returned to her eyes. "Then how do we get out?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that every time we tried to drive out, the forest changed the roads. It wanted us to stay. It needed us to stay. And I was beginning to understand why. The shadows. They were never just shadows. They were people. People who'd come before us, who'd gotten trapped, who'd been consumed and reformed into these flat, dark things that pointed the wrong way. The forest was full of them, all these two-dimensional ghosts, and it wanted to add us to its collection. When dawn finally came, a gray, reluctant dawn that seemed to struggle against the darkness, the voices stopped. The knocking ceased. We were left in ringing silence. "I have an idea," I said. "What?" "The ranger. She gave us that permit with the Tlingit writing. She knew something about this place. Maybe there's a way to appease it or ward it off." "The permit is just paper, Owen. But maybe it's not. Maybe those words mean something. Some kind of protection." I went to where we'd stashed our documents, pulled out the permit. The Tlingit writing on the back was still there, dark and careful. I held it up to the light, and for just a moment the letters seemed to shift, rearranging themselves into something almost readable. "Warning," I read slowly, the meaning coming to me in intuition rather than translation. "The land that hungers. The shadows that point toward hunger. Leave offerings. Do not sleep. Do not—" The letters shifted again, became incomprehensible. "Do not what?" Diane asked. "I don't know. I can't read the rest." "Offerings." She said offerings. Diane went to her bag, pulled out the bundles of tobacco and cornmeal she'd brought. I was going to leave these anyway for the spirits. Maybe that's what it wants. It's worth trying. We gathered the offerings, 7 small bundles wrapped in cloth. Then, working up our courage, we opened the RV door. The forest outside looked normal. Morning light filtered through the trees. Birds sang. Their calls sounded right, not the mechanical wrongness we'd heard before. The shadows fell naturally. "It's a trick," Diane whispered. "Maybe, but we have to try." We walked to the edge of the clearing, moving carefully, waiting for something to grab us. But nothing did. The forest simply watched, patient and ancient and hungry. Diane placed the first offering at the base of a massive Sitka spruce, then the second, the third. With each one, I felt a subtle shift in the air, like pressure releasing. By the 7th offering, the forest had changed. The trees looked less menacing. The shadows looked normal. "Is it over?" Diane asked. "I don't know." We went back to the RV, got in, and I turned the key. The engine started immediately. I put it in drive and began to move slowly down the logging road. This time, the road stayed consistent. I recognized landmarks from our drive in: the split boulder, the fallen cedar, the creek crossing. We were going the right way. We were getting out. The drive took 3 hours, but it felt like 3 minutes. I was so focused on the road, so afraid it would change again, that I barely breathed. Diane gripped the armrest, silent, watching the trees pass. When we finally emerged from the forest onto the main highway, we both started crying, just sobbing with relief, the tension of the past days flooding out in tears. We drove straight to Juneau without stopping, went to the ranger station. The building was there, but when we asked for the old Tlingit woman, the ranger on duty looked confused. "There's no one by that description working here," he said, "and we don't have a permit for Whispering Creek issued to you." He checked his computer. "Actually, we don't have any record of that campsite at all." "But she sold us the permit," I insisted, pulling out the paper. "Right here." The paper was blank. The Tlingit writing had vanished. Even our names and dates had disappeared, leaving just a blank form. The ranger looked at us with concern. "Are you folks all right? Do you need medical attention?" We left quickly after that, drove the RV onto the next available ferry, and didn't speak about what happened until we were back in Seattle. That was 3 months ago. We sold the RV immediately. Haven't been camping since. Probably never will again. Diane quit her teaching job, said she couldn't look at children the same way anymore, kept seeing shadows behind them. I still work IT, but I've started having problems with shadows. Computer screens show them wrong sometimes. My reflection in the bathroom mirror occasionally points in directions I'm not standing. The worst part is the dreams. We both have them every night now. Dreams where we're still in that forest, still trapped, the road changing and changing and changing. Dreams where we look down and realize we're becoming shadows ourselves, flattening, darkening, losing dimension, and sometimes, in those dreams, we see the others. All the people who came before us who didn't make it out. They're shadows now, pointing the wrong way, pointing toward the hunger. They're trying to warn us about something, but we can't understand them. Can't hear what they're trying to say. The doctors say it's PTSD, that we had some kind of shared psychotic episode brought on by isolation and stress. They've prescribed pills that make the days easier, but don't stop the dreams. Nothing stops the dreams. Last week, I found something that makes me think we didn't really escape. I was cleaning out the RV before we sold it. Wanted to make sure we got every trace of that trip out of our lives. In the back storage compartment, I found one of Diane's offering bundles, but it had been opened. The tobacco and cornmeal gone, and in their place was a small stick figure made of twigs and what looked like human hair. I burned it immediately. Didn't tell Diane. But that night, for the first time since we'd left the forest, I heard the knocking. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. It's getting closer. I think the offerings didn't buy us freedom. They bought us time. Time to run. Time to pretend we were safe. But the forest is patient. The shadows are patient. They've been pointing the wrong way for us this whole time, pointing toward the hunger, and eventually they'll point us right back to where we came from. Diane doesn't know yet. I can't bring myself to tell her, but I've started seeing the symbols, that dark sun, appearing in random places, carved into telephone poles, scratched into the paint of parked cars. Once written in soap on our bathroom mirror, though neither of us remembered writing it. The shadows in our apartment don't point right anymore. I noticed it yesterday. They're subtle about it, shifting just slightly when I'm not looking directly at them, but they're all orienting toward the same direction. Northwest, toward Alaska, toward the Tongass, toward Whispering Creek. I think they're calling us back. I think they want to finish what they started. And the most terrifying part? Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I want to go. I want to get back in the RV and drive north and find that logging road and return to that clearing. I want to walk into the forest and let the shadows take me, flatten me, make me point the wrong way forever. Diane feels it too. I can see it in her eyes when she thinks I'm not looking. The pull of it, the hunger answering the hunger. We've started sleeping with the lights on. All of them. Every bulb in the apartment blazing. It helps a little. Shadows can't form without darkness, but we can't stay awake forever. Eventually we'll have to sleep. Eventually the darkness will come, and when it does, I think we'll find ourselves back in that clearing, back at Whispering Creek, back in the forest that hungers, back where the shadows point the wrong way and the roads change and time folds in on itself like paper. I think we never really left at all. I think we're still there, still in the RV, still waiting for dawn, and everything since, Seattle, the doctors, the sold RV, this apartment, is just a dream the forest is feeding us while it slowly consumes us from the inside out. My shadow is pointing at the window right now. I'm sitting at my desk, the lamp beside me, and my shadow should fall across the desk to my right. But it's pointing at the window instead, pointing northwest. Pointing home. Diane just called from the bedroom. She says she can hear knocking. I tell her it's just the neighbors, but we both know that's a lie. We don't have neighbors on that side. That wall faces an alley, and nothing is there but darkness. The knocking is getting louder. My name is Owen, and I'm 34, and the shadows at the Tongass National Forest pointed the wrong way. They still do. They always will.